Welcome, everyone. I'm very, very happy that we are hosting today Courtenay Turner, who has been in dialogue, in collaboration with Cynthia, with myself, now for quite some time. And her bloodhound nose has really impressed us immensely at being able to find the right pathway that really leads to the causal nexus of what is shaping our reality. Where are the sets of ideas that have caused humanity to slide into chaos, into tragedy throughout history? And where are those bad ideas, those smelly, perverse ideas being repeated once again, such that we can better understand how to navigate out of those traps that have destroyed so many civilizations of the past? So, Courtney has really um, pulled the thread on something that's tied to a cybernetics cult that I think a lot of people here, to some degree or another, are quite familiar with, that's been built up, especially after World War II, and the cybernetics cult, which is tied to the growth of a transhumanist ideology, a transhumanist religion, um, is not should not be taken lightly. This is a very, very disgusting abomination, but it's a very, very influential thing that might have one of its hubs in Silicon Valley, but it's not located geographically. And so Horny's work on Game B, on the broader manipulative transhumanist networks that have been trying to nudge humanity into a very bad place, has been of high value to both Cynthia and myself. So we're very, very happy that she's going to go through some of her newer research. And like usual, after the formal presentation is done, we're going to open up for some open dialogue. So I ask people to keep it organized, to put your name in the chat box or raise a digital hand, and we'll take note and call upon you accordingly. So without further ado, Courtney Turner.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you so much for having me back. Yes, I think the way you phrased that was a great introduction to, kind of frame what we're going to discuss here. I do see it as a cybernetics cult, and the fact that Jim Rutt seems to be their spiritual and technological and economic and he's essentially, his background is in systems theory. So he's the chairman. He was the chairman of Santa Fe Institute, and that is what they study: complexity theory, systems theory. So it kind of encompasses all of these things and integrates them. So I think that very much speaks to it being a cybernetic cult. And if you've watched the last presentation I did with y'all, it was focusing on kind of like this age of Aquarius, which I do think is also another kind of spiritual cult. And now they call themselves the evolutionary leaders. I'm not going to go too much into them today because that would be another really long presentation, but they are very, very influential in the sphere. There's a lot of overlap with many of the evolutionary leaders. But of course, the age of Aquarius is very much what I see this as, only with emerging of technology. So it really, to me, is kind of a utopian scientific socialism with ethics very much at the helm. This kind of merging of, it's like a Hegelian synthesis of the external ethics, kind of like the UNESCO style, where they will force that ethics upon you, or UN, which UNESCO is a part of, or this kind of internal ethics where you're brainwashed into this collective consciousness of ethics. And that is what is kind of driving this. Is this in a way, and a lot of these people actually do use Aristotle as their guide. His golden mean of ethics, kind of this middle road. People will argue with me on this, but just for the sake of the framework, understand that a lot of these evolutionary leaders, these thought leaders in Game B, do point to the golden mean, because they see it as this middle way, or maybe the third way of ethics, if you will, which is this synthesis, the Hegelian synthesis of the external versus the internal. And so it is kind of this utopian scientific socialism where we're going to be all converging into Teilhard de Chardin's version of the Noosphere. And I'm very concerned about it. If you saw, sorry, to back up, when I was talking about the age of Aquarius, this is very much what this is, only with the with emergent technologies. So I think when this concept first came about, This is just to give you a little kind of backdrop, and then we'll get into what it is. But when it first came about, a lot of these technologies really were just a vision, very conceptual. Maybe they had some access to the actual technologies in a more classified context of, the military-industrial complex. That I'm not privy to that information. But for the masses, it really was just very much conceptual, visionary ideas of what it would look like. But now we're in a space, more than a decade later, where Game B may have seemed very fringe, but these technologies are really, they call them emerging technologies. And these technologies have advanced quite a bit, and we are really seeing what could be a reality of this vision. And that is part of why I find it very concerning now. It's not just an idea, a concept. But the Age of Aquarius, just to very simply put it, and to give you just a little recap of kind of what we went through last time when we talked about people like Barbara Marx Hubbard, we talked about Maslow, of course, the Stanford Research Institute Changing Images of Man. And these are all very integral to this concept of the Age of Aquarius, which was popularized through Marilyn Ferguson's Aquarian Conspiracy book. And it was Willis Harman, who was, he was one of the main directors of this Changing Images of Man project at Stanford Research Institute. It was his assistant who he used as the pseudonym, Marilyn Ferguson, to popularize these ideas in a book. That would go out to the masses and was very much promulgated. But it's this idea that we are moving out of the industrial age, we are moving out of the age of Pisces, as they call it, into the age of Aquarius, which is instead of it being about a focus on the individual and on competition and unique kind of emergence, individual agency, it's a focus on collective and cooperation and moving out of rivalry into collaboration. And these are the central themes of Game B. So I want you just to keep that in the backdrop when you're thinking about Game B. That's really the focus, is that they keep saying that Game A is rivalrous. And so we need to move into Game B, which is all about the collective and collaboration and cooperation. And as usual with these types of thinkers, they tend to use a lot of words that will seem very familiar to most of us, but they redefine what it means. So they have different definitions of what these words mean than what might ring a bell for you and be what you think of when you look into the traditional dictionary. They have their own dictionaries. So that's kind of the backdrop of this. And, I mentioned the evolutionary leaders. So we're thinking about the evolutionary leaders, think about people like Barbara Marx Hubbard, who really was kind of she's very much the guru for a lot of these people, and a lot of these people who are Game B thought leaders. And she was part of the conscious evolution platform. I believe she's also an evolutionary leader. You can go look at their website and read all about them. That's an actual group, and it's a pretty big group, and it is not fringe at all. Many of you probably have heard of these names because Oprah has been platforming them for well over a decade. But it's this idea of conscious evolution. And Bruce Lifton, who's also an evolutionary leader, and I talked about him last time, he talks about it in terms of a spiral. And when we think of these spirals, Barbara Marx Hubbard talks about these spirals a lot as well. And when you think of them, I think of them very much as the Hegelian spiral, where Alf-Haben is the rungs on the ladder that you see. And my kind of framework for the Hegelian dialectical spiral is like a Gnostic Jacob's ladder. They do see it as that they are gods, and we'll see that when we get into Game B. Stuart Brand actually says it. And it's like right on their website. So it is kind of a Gnostic cybernetic cult. Where they do believe that we are gods, or they are gods, really, because it's about those who have consciously evolved. So if you recall, last time I talked about Maslow and his Eupsychian network, that is very much kind of in the backdrop. They don't refer to the Eupsychian network, but that I see that very much in the backdrop of these game B thought leaders. It's these people who were spiritually evolved. So a lot of people are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and they usually put a picture of a pyramid, which he actually rejected. He never used a pyramid, but I guess it was an easier way for textbooks to sell the idea. And so he talks about people having this, their base needs met. And once you've reached those, the main focus of his work, which was not as popularized, was really on being values. He called them B values. And of course, this was the people who had already achieved these base level needs. They've gone through the hierarchy as they pictorially display it. And now they could focus on things like politics and religion and, the bigger questions of life that he saw as being much more important. But that people who are still struggling with having their basic needs met could not, focus on that sort of thing. And so he called the people who were consciously evolved, self-actualized was the term he used. But, of course, Barbara Marx Hubbard, who was very inspired by Maslow, a lot of these people were. She talks about how Psyche networking, when she met Maslow and learned about this term, was so invigorating for her. It was actually better than sex. And that this network of people is where they could focus on things like politics. They could focus on creating a structure of what he called in his Politics 3, which was actually published by the Stanford Research Institute in 1971. It was published posthumously. They went to Bertha Maslow, she was in collaboration with Willis Harman, who was one of the people who published this right around the same time as Changing Images of Man, and he called it like holistic politics. And this is very similar to the idea that we see in the UN Secretary General Robert Mueller's concept of planetics. So these people who are part of this Psyche network, they're spiritually evolved, they've reached their higher levels of conscious evolution. We've seen this also from people like Madame Blavatsky, Alice Bailey, who also talk about these types of concepts of being spiritually evolved and having a higher state of consciousness. So these are the people who can focus on these sort of things, and I think Game B are the people who feel that they are part of this Psychian network. And while they phrase it as being something that's very egalitarian and decentralized, of course, if you have not spiritually evolved and the clique does not accept you, then you will be subsumed or left out, locked out. And before I get into this, one more thing I will just add to give you kind of the context is I know a lot of people are concerned about things like central bank digital currencies. And with the emerging technologies, this is a very valid concern. I certainly do not want a central bank digital currency that puts us on some sort of a tokenized economy where if I don't have the right social credit score, which X seems to now be following, not that we should be surprised because he did say he wants to make it WeChat, but better. But people are very concerned about that, and not that I want to undermine those concerns, but I think a lot of people don't recognize that the very same thing could be happening through public-private partnerships. And this is something that people like Peter Thiel are very much a proponent of. So I did a video, and I won't go too much into this either, but if people want more information on that, I did do a video on the network state, which is not an idea that Peter Thiel himself has created. It was actually Srinivasan, who is the CTO of Coinbase. And but Peter Thiel had come up with a concept called seasteading, and he invested quite a bit of money, actually a small chump change for him, but a lot of money to most people, into this idea, and it kind of went belly up. It did not, go anywhere, but it was very similar, only it was through more of an oceanic concept versus land-based or really cyber-based. And so the network state is the cyber-based concept of this seasteading. It's kind of this a different iteration of it. And it is where you have a dissolution of network of like geographical nation states, and instead you will have ideological states that are connected through various technological platforms. And this is where, as a concept, I find it concerning. But when you have technologies like Web3, which Game B is very much a proponent of, what they call these decentralized technologies, then it becomes very much a potential reality. And I do see it very concerning, because in these network states, you have to enter. And in order to enter, you'll have something like a digital ID or a digital wallet of some sort. Things will be tokenized. And of course, because it's ideologically based, if you do not evolve to their ideology or their consciousness, their conscious state, the collective vision that they uphold, then you could easily be locked out. And of course, this is all hypothetical, but if you read The Network State, it's a book that Srinivasan has written. It's very much what they lay out. And when you look into some of these technologies, that is very much what is possible. So, you're depending upon the kindness of these people, which historically speaking has not always worked out so well. So let's get into what is Game B. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, if you're not familiar, what on earth is this Game B? Well, it was born out, Jim Rutt, as I said, is kind of their leader. This really was kind of his vision, although it has developed kind of collectively through a bunch of these thought leaders whose names I think are going to look very familiar to you. Another great backdrop of this is the intellectual dark web. A lot of members of this intellectual dark web are Game B proponents. It's very interesting that at the time when Game B was first emerging as a concept, a lot of these leaders were not very well known. So this is just my theory, but I do think in part the intellectual dark web was, I do think it was an influence operation in general for a lot of things, but I do think in part to promulgate this concept of Game B. And you can see that through all of these various thought leaders I'm going to go through a bunch of them, not all of them because there are too many. But when you start seeing these names, they're all, being on, they're cross-promoting on all of these shows, which they call kind of it's like I forgot what they call it, but it's like a internet think tanks is what, something like that, but it's these various podcasts where they have all of these discussions publicly. Of course, some of them are also privately. So what is it? So it was back in 2011, Jim Rutt had what he called the Stanton meetings. And in fact, there is you can look right on Jim's, what's it called, on his Twitter page. He kind of goes through it because I guess people were asking him. They were like, well, what on earth is Game B and how did this come about? And he says that it started, they were trying to create something called the Emancipation Party. And there's a lot of political parties and ideas that have come out of this concept, and that look very similar to each other. They're not all necessarily interconnected. But the Emancipation Party was one. Some of the others that I'll mention, but I won't go too much into detail right now, but they're a little bit later, are things like the United Independent Party, which is Christopher Life. And this was really being pushed in 2020. A lot of these ideas were really being catapulted in 2020. And I think in part it's because they keep talking about how, we need to solve a meta crisis. So, the old adage, never let a crisis go to waste. I think that in part they like to usurp things that might look like crises. And of course they take advantage of those things. So, and in some cases, I think they also create the idea that things might be crises that aren't actually crises. But if you remember, I talked a lot about the cosmoerotic humanist. They talk about that as well, the meta crises. So that was Christopher Life, and it was the United Independent Party, which I think is just the title alone is oxymoronic. But all these are ideas of going beyond the two-party system. I'm not saying that there aren't problems with the two-party system here in the United States or political parties in general across the world. George Washington in the United States did warn against the two-party system, and he did warn that it would be an invitation for foreign entanglement and essentially for, he didn't use these words, but Hegelian dialectical operations to be weaponized, and that he didn't use those words, but that is essentially what he did warn about. And so these people are launching off of the concept that there's problems in, and a lot of people do recognize that, with the two-party system, and they're going beyond that to create kind of like a one party, and that's another party that's arisen out of this. The one party. There's also the People's Party, and the People's Party has a very, very long history going all the way back to the bimetallists. But this is the Emancipation Party, and the Emancipation Party was in 2011. Jim Rout was trying to launch this as a political movement, and he describes it as it's very much aligned with kind of like the Bernie Sanders platform, and one of their main concepts, and we'll go through it. He has it right on his Twitter page, but they talk about UBIs, and that is something the Game B advocates are very much supportive of. And with the emerging technologies, tokenization, I think we're going to see their version of what a UBI looks like. And it does seem to look a little bit to me like what we see in the AI World Society. So if you're familiar with the UN AI World Society, they kind of have they have a whole blueprint for what that will look like. And this is it's kind of like the metaverse, but for the whole world. And they talk about how human governments will be supplanted by AI controlled governments. And they talk about like having smart cities, and the central node for all the smart cities will be in Ukraine. They talk about, there are many symposiums they've done on rebuilding Ukraine, and that they have to rebuild Ukraine because it's been decimated by the war, and Ukraine is going to be the central hub where all of these nodes all over the world will be interconnected through this central locus. And they see that as being Ukraine. But in this, they talk about things like the Internet of Things, the Internet of Bodies, the Internet of Nano-Bio things. They talk about 6G and how 6G will have it will harness, and this study was done at a University Amherst, Massachusetts. You can look it up. It sounds like I'm talking crazy talk, but I mean, they put it out to the public. So they talk about how they will harness human energy to power 6G. And now they're starting to talk about things like mitochondria as being, which is the powerhouse for human, as somehow being utilized to power 6G, which is going to be a way of connecting the Internet of Nano-Bio things. So all of that to say that these technologies are going to play into things like tokenization and how a UBI could be administered. And they call it a social value reward system in the AI World Society. They say it's based on the model of the social credit system in China, but that their term is social value reward system because I think it just sounds more euphemistic. This idea that we're earning it somehow is you're being rewarded for your social behavior, but it really is the same thing. And they essentially say that. They say it's modeled off of a social credit system. Okay, so let's look at this platform that he has laid out for. Yeah, so he says it was born out of this, and this Emancipation Party, which did not work. He said it failed really fast, and he says that right in his tweet here. And Game B grew directly from that. The reason he says it failed was because he says that the boomers were all on board, but that's not very effective for a political movement. And he says Gen X, you could kind of get them excited, but that they were, it was a mixed bag. But he said the millennials were very excited about the platform. They loved things like the UBI, but that they hated the idea of any political party. I guess because they were more anarchistic in their ideological framework. And so the idea of a new political party was just an anathema to them. And so he felt like they really just couldn't get this off the ground. But out of this was this idea of Game B. And so it was Thor Mueller, I believe, who was his name, who was involved in these Stanton meetings. Brett Weinstein was also very much involved in these initial Stanton meetings. And if you want to hear that whole story of Game B Rebel Wisdom, who's kind of a adjacent Game B platformer, they've done some great videos, and they did an explainer video interviewing both Brett Weinstein and Jim Rutt about the inception of Game B, and they go through the whole history, which is a few hours long. So if you want more information on that, you can check out that podcast. And so then they decide to launch this Game B. And Game B internally did have some conflicts, which I find is very typical of these things. I like to show you that it's, organic, because these people are infighting, but not to dispute that people have different ideas and that there might be discussions that organically occur. But I think oftentimes it's a little bit more of a Hegelian framework, where they're showing you we have these two problems, and we're going to synthesize them to give you the solution. And then that's kind of what happened. They had like the way Jim Rutt phrases it is that he had the people who were a little bit more, his woo-woo would be the word. They were much more spiritually oriented, and he says he really had a problem with that because he's very much kind of like a hard evidence scientific person. I think when you hear some of his interviews, that's questionable, but that is what he says. And so he said that he had a real problem with that, and so that was kind of the conflict between some of the people in it. But when you look at what Game B is, it's kind of a merger of those two. It is the synthesis of the kind of spiritual, the cosmo-erotic humanists, the people who believe in conscious evolution, this idea of building the noosphere, and you're going to see one of the technologies is called the No Map, and they actually say it's about inhabiting the noosphere, and it's spelled Noomap, so it is literally about building the noosphere. They changed their name to S7 Foundation, of course, because that's what they do. They always change these things, so that you can't follow the train, but you can follow that it was originally called No Map. And so they've kind of merged these concepts of very scientific, technologically based, with this kind of spiritual, conscious evolution component. So if you are interested in what the Emancipation Party was doing, just to see, wow, now I can't actually pull it up. He had posted this really recently, but yeah, now it is gone. So, but one of the big platforms was the UBI. And if you want, you can look at actually, and we'll go through some of it. Jim Rutt had written in 2020. Of course, a lot of this came out of 2020. He wrote A Journey to Game B, and he does go through some of the Emancipation Party platform, but it was very similar to Bernie Sanders, so we can leave it at that. All right, so let's go to the Game B homepage. And I actually don't have full access to this. A lot of this stuff, they keep talking about how it is all transparent, it is all ground up. However, a lot of it is behind closed doors. So that seems to be a little oxymoronic to me, but that is where we are at with all. It's very typical. So you look at this welcome to Game B home, and this is also, sorry, before we get that, as of 17 hours ago, maybe it's a few more, less than 24 hours ago, Jim Rutt talked about on his the Game B Facebook page. He says that people have suggested him buying the domain. So he kind of threw out a bunch of like possible domains. So for people who don't think that this is very active, that was yesterday that he was talking to his Facebook page about this buying the domain for Game B. So this one here, he says, when a system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence have the capacity to shift the entire system. And this, to me, is really where we see the concept of kind of like the network states. So it's the idea that they're now going to shift the entire system into these new little nodes that are all interconnected. And of course, they do say that they're completely decentralized. Decentralized is a big buzzword for them. But when you understand the technologies, and I know I've been told by so many people, I just don't understand how decentralized technologies work. It kind of reminds me a lot of talking to, people about Teilhard Chardin's Noosphere or to Marxists, they always tell me I just don't know enough. I don't understand it well enough. And maybe that is true, but I've just heard it so many times, and this all just kind of start to look like another iteration of the same thing. We are gaining the power of gods, but without the wisdom, love, and discernment of gods, that is self-extinctionary scenario. So they keep talking about how game A is going to self-destruct, that we are going to self-destruct as a people, as society, and really Earth. And their vision is to create, like what Barbara Marx Hubbard kept talking about. We're going to go from Homo sapiens to become Homo universalis. And this harkens back to like H.G. Wells. And it's really this kind of concept of now we are not people of Earth, we are people of the universe. And they also talk about how we have to rewrite the story of the universe. And this is a very common theme too, is that, we have to rewrite the story. So we rewrite the story of the universe, we rewrite the story of humanity. If you're familiar with Jordan Peterson's ARC, Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, and he's on the Game B site as well. And of course, he was part of the intellectual dark web, so we see some continuity there. But that whole website is all about how we have to rewrite a better story. We need a new story. And they're, if you're not familiar with them, I actually did a whole video on that also. And they claim to be the resistance to the World Economic Forum, which is interesting because their funding is tied to direct managers of the World Economic Forum. So basically the money is coming from the World Economic Forum. So I'm not sure how they reconcile that. But when you look at the platform, it looks like it's really just the, dialectical right-hand path of the same agenda. So they say that we are welcome to Game B, a trans-contextual inquiry into a new social operating system for humanity. Game A is what got us into this meta-crisis and collapse. Game B is what emerges in response. Come play with us as we learn to become wiser together. Gain coherence. Remember, we talked about Barbara Marx Hubbard's global coherence through HeartMap. So, when it's just a concept, I can say, okay, I still have my own individual agency. As far as I know, I have my own individual consciousness. I still have free will. I believe I do. Because I believe in free will, you are entitled to believe whatever you want. That is what I'm trying to preserve here by educating people on these topics, because they want to create collective intelligence and collective consciousness that eradicates that. But with these technologies, they're talking about, and they take elements that are valid and that are predicated on scientific facts, like the fact that our heart has a resonance of up to, they say it's electromagnetic field of up to 12 feet. And in fact, when they talk about how human beings are magnetic and some people are more magnetic than others, this actually is rooted in scientific fact. Like some people have a stronger and further ranging electromagnetic field than others. However, when we start playing around with technologies like this to try and create a global coherence so that all of our hearts can resonate in sync, this is a little concerning to me. If you choose to do that, great, but I don't want that being done without my awareness or consent. And begin to move towards a new social operating system emphasizing human well-being and metastability. What does that even all mean? They have defined these terms, but it really does not. It basically sounds like utopia is what it sounds like to me. But yeah, so they want to, use technology in order to bring us towards this. And I wanted to just point out the term well-being, because this is something we hear out of UN and UN acolytes a lot, right? A well-being economy, which Game B is very much a proponent of. They will get into some of the economic frameworks that they are advocating. And of course, they really describe this as just as a new social operating system. And of course, this has nothing to do with our future economic frameworks, but it has everything to do with it when you start looking at the technologies and tokenization and Web3 types of frameworks. So I'm not saying the Web3 has to be used this way, by the way. I understand that, with any kind of technology, the technology itself is neutral, but it's what is the potential that it unlocks, and who are the people who are going to be harnessing that. That's really what we need to look at, in my opinion. And it's built on good values. I'm not sure who dictates these values and what are good values. That's a question to me. That we will be happy to call home. Who will be happy to call home? And where is this home? And we will be proud to leave to our descendants. So that is what they open it with. That's kind of their front page. But of course, I'm not allowed to look any further than that because I'm not a member. So then they have this Game B wiki, and we're going to go through Game B wiki. That might take a little bit of time, so settle in. There's a lot on this Game B wiki page, and they give us kind of an introduction to Game B. Hang on while I find that. So I'll just start with what Stuart Brand says, and of course Stuart Brand, I'm sure, is a name that's very familiar to a lot of you. He's currently one of the co-founders, along with Kelly, of the New Long Foundation. People like Jonathan Haidt have done many speeches and collaborations with them. So in 1968, he says, "We are as gods, we might as well get good at it." And this was the opening for his Whole Earth magazine. That was kind of the opening introduction to that magazine that he launched. And then and that ties into a lot of this. So I had last year, I was invited to speak to my state capital to inform them on the natural asset companies. And I don't know how many of you are familiar, but there was a proposal up on the SEC with the New York Stock Exchange partnering with the SEC to try and put a new proposal where they would essentially create these natural asset companies to commodify the air we breathe. And I mean that actually literally. That was one of the things they wanted to commodify. This really plays into Game B and the emerging technologies. Because of course it's always couched, just like a lot of the UN language, in advancing the betterment of man, and we've got to save the environment and protect planet Earth and Mother Gaia. But how do they propose to do that is through these surveillance technologies. And so this very much ties into a lot of what was going on with the natural capital accounting and the natural asset companies. So the Whole Earth magazine is, of course, relevant here. And then in 2015, he says, "We are gods, we better get good at it." So my premise that this is a Gnostic cybernetic cult, I think, kind of is exemplified here. They're talking about how they are gods. And of course, it's not all of us. It's those of us who are in that Eupsychian network, the Eupsychian class, who are consciously evolved. Game A is everything humanity has been doing the past 10,000 years. Now we are coming up against its hard limits. The existing order is being broken down. So of course this is there has to be a crisis. So they keep talking about how Game A is, we're up against this meta crisis, and Game B is going to be the solution to this crisis. And that is whatever is coming next. Now, of course, they don't really have a framework. This is all visionary blueprints. None of this is, they don't really have a solution. So this reminds me a lot of critical theory. They tell you what all the problems with Game A are, but what they propose for Game B is a lot of utopian kind of visions, but they don't really have like tangible solutions. It's all about how we should collaborate, and we will come up with the Game B utopia. In spite of today's apocalyptic headlines and the usual doomsayers everywhere, we of Game B are convinced that a brighter future is possible. Sooner or later, a new set of social systems will emerge out of the chaos of today. We intend to make it the best we can. Would you like to join us and help make a bright future? Well, of course, who wouldn't? So then they go on, they talk about Game B is a community. And really, I think that's kind of code for it is building communitarian frameworks. And I do think that that's a lot of what these people's vision for the future is communitarianism. I've done a few episodes on that. I won't take too much time to go into what communitarianism is, but it's kind of like it's very similar to like communal living, or it's communism with opt-in tyranny, really, and with technology. enhancing it. That's the very, kind of Cliff Notes version, but I've done hours of shows kind of going into what communitarianism is. But I think that's when they talk about community, that's what they mean. So again, we have Ilya I don't know how to say his last name, so I'm going to not butcher it. If anybody wants to correct me, they can.
I think it's Prigozhin.
Yeah, that's kind of what it looks like. Prigozhin, yeah. When a system is far from equilibrium, right, this is the same quote, islands of coherence have the capacity to shift the entire system. So they talk about how at Game B, they're a community of occupation thinkers and doers. Okay, it's hard. Bodhi, how do we say that? Bodhisattvas? They mean spiritual leaders. I know what it means, but I can never say it. Bodhisattva. Yes. And business people and economists and ecologists and visionaries and pragmatists. Working together, we aim to create islands of coherence that grow to become a great attractor. They talk about attractors a lot. Daniel Schmachtenberger keeps talking about the third attractor, and Jim Rutt keeps talking about the fifth attractor, as a way of living that succeeds and spreads because it is resilient, sustainable, and more effective than that of the status quo. And of course, these are terms we hear coming out of the UN all the time, right? The resilient, sustainable, and when they say resilient, of course, they've redefined this as well. If you hear, I think Brett Weinstein makes this so clear. Really, when they talk about resilient and sustainable, they mean permanent. That's really what they mean. I had actually gone to, it was a religious, it was a service, and I couldn't believe they were saying this, but they were talking about the concept of overcoming. And they said that overcoming doesn't mean what this was a very, I guess, Marxist kind of new agey service that I didn't expect that when I walked in. But they were thanking Marx, and they thanked Kabbalah, and they ended with thanking Spinoza. I was like, really? We're going to thank Spinoza? Okay. But they talked about how, and then this just reminds me of this, because they talked about how they were very resilient people, and they said that resilience doesn't mean what people typically think of. It means it's not about overcoming, it's about becoming. And this is a concept we see throughout the philosophical framework of a lot of these Gnostic thinkers, people like Heidegger, the whole existentialist camp, and they keep talking about becoming. And of course, so what are you becoming? I think they think they're becoming gods. But this idea of resilience is so that we can become, and we can create this new framework, and it's this permanence. And you can look at the Maha speech that Brett Weinstein did for the Rescuing the Republic. Cynthia did a great film incorporating a lot of these concepts when he talks about phoenixing the Republic. It's not a republic if you can keep it. It's a republic if you can phoenix it. And if you haven't seen her film on it, it was fantastic. And she goes through all of these concepts. But this is very much relevant, I think, to what they are talking about, because, of course, they're talking about we have to obliterate the old system, right? In order to phoenix and rebirth something, we have to destroy so we can build back better. And that is what they talk about with Game A versus Game B. Game A is the old system that needs to be obliterated and eradicated. They claim that it's just inevitable. We're going to do it to ourselves. And so Game B is what needs to emerge. Okay, so why do we think our non-hierarchical bottom-up self-organizing approach can work? Because this is the way the universe has been working for nearly 14 billion years. It's how we've gotten to where we are today. Game B has working groups in economics, currency, and monetary theory. They claim that that's not what it's about, but right here it says it is. The future of cities, political meta-modernism, which is a synthetic term, by the way. You can look it up yourself, but meta-modernism is one of these concepts that they talk about a lot, and it is the kind of synthesis of modernity, the cultural modernity, and postmodernism. So they say it's kind of like the hybrid of the two, and that's what we're moving into, is this meta-modernism. And the nation states, permaculture, parenting, intentional communities. We also hold presentation events and social gatherings. So as their community grows, there will be many additional working groups, and of course they invite you. Would you like to start one in your field of expertise? And again, they go on to talk about cooperation and collaboration, and synthesis of various viewpoints is very important to build this new social operating system. Okay, so then they say that game B is the solution. And of course, who do they use? A quote from E.O. Wilson. And some of you may be familiar with him, biologist. He wrote the book Half Earth. And this is what the UN plan for Agenda 2030, the 30 by 30 plan, is really a stepping stone to E.O. Wilson's Half Earth agenda. And Biden did rebranding of the 30 by 30. He called it America the Beautiful, because that sounds a lot nicer than stealing 30% of the world's land and oceans and making it uninhabitable for humans, which is really what that's about. And of course, it's, as I said, it's just a stepping stone to get towards their Half Earth agenda, which is based on this book that E.O. Wilson had written, and I believe it was in 2016. And he says we have a, but he's been writing for decades, so this concept is that he's been building out is not new. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. So again, this idea of an AI god determining our ethics is really what Game B seems to be building. At least that's what it looks like to me. So no one no one of us by ourselves knows how to avoid the looming disasters that face us or build a society of tomorrow that we all would wish to see. And I would just like to say, I don't know that we all have the same vision of what the world we'd like to see in the future is. I mean, that would be beautiful if we did and we could create it, but I don't know if that's true, because I think we do have individual consciousness and free will. But we are certain that that is possible. If we came together and we could work together, our certainty is grounded in hard evidence. I don't know how they reconcile all this hard evidence with conscious evolution, but they're working on it. Somehow, systems of greater complexity that self-organize from the bottom up have been emerging ever since the Big Bang. After 14 billion years, there is no reason to assume that this process will stop now. Evolution is not done with us. Next, new order of society will eventually emerge. And that is good news. So I chuckled when I read this, about the Big Bang, because when you read a lot of these people who are proponent of Game B, like the Cosmoerotic Humanism document, this you can find at the Office for the Future. I think it's officeforthefuture.com, and it's first values and first principles of evolving perennialism. So the title right there tells you what this is all about. And this is written by, they say, David Temple. David Temple is a hybrid. I don't know how it is that Zach Stein and Kenneth Wilber and Mark Gaffney somehow make up David Temple, but they do. And it's a pretty, I think it's 157 pages. So, it's a pretty lengthy document, white paper, outlining what cosmoerotic humanism is, and this is a term that was co-created with Barbara Marx Hubbard. They say that it was like a telepathic kind of experience and synchronistic, and they all came up with it all at once but separately. And but in this they talk about how there's really been 4 Big Bangs. This is very similar to CERN talks about this too. I think that they realize that people have maybe questioned this concept of a Big Bang theory, and so now they're saying that it is wrong, but what there really is there's multiple Big Bangs, and we need to rewrite the story of the universe is really what they conclude. So the bad news is that periods of transitions like today, when an old order is breaking down and the new order is just emerging and generally volatile, turbulent, chaotic, even apocalyptic in the human society, these can be full-blown dark ages. We are in one of these apocalyptic transition phases now. Of course, they have to terrify you so that you understand why we need this radical change and we need game B. But there's more good news. Yes, of course. You know, we scared you. Isn't this like, this is like trauma-based mind control I'm watching unfold here. Um, it like Lewin's, what is it? Freeze, change, unfreeze. And there's more good news. We understand the processes of complex self-organizing systems like never before. Today, we have such a handle on processes as nonlinearity, second-order effects, probability network, holism. Holism is another big concept for them. They talk a lot about fractals, and we'll see later in some of the emerging technologies, there's things like hollow chains, and some of those videos are very interesting. They talk about holochains being built on blockchains, and we'll get into that. But symbiosis and evolution. And critically, we have more tools for self-knowledge than ever before. Our challenge is to use what we know to minimize the suffering during this time of turbulent change, and to maximize the beneficence of the next emerging world order. So, of course, we're building the new world order. These various systems that we have tied into the 20th century are not capable of tackling the new crises that face us. We urgently need to evolve new solutions while keeping the best of the old. So that's another thing I do want to point out, which is very interesting to me, because they keep talking about how game B is the problem and we need to essentially wipe out game B. We need to move, game A is, you know, the problem. We need to, it's the meta crisis. We need to move into game B. However, when you really read what they're talking about, that's not what they say. And I'm going to show a clip of their film, which explicitly states that we need game B incorporates, and people like Jim Rutt, Jordan Hall, Daniel Schmachtenberger, they all talk about how we actually need to parasitize game A. And I think what they mean a lot of things by that. But one of the things that they really want from game A is the technology. Of course, game B can't work without these emergent technologies, which are a byproduct, an artifact of game A. So I do think that that's just a really important thing to point out, because they keep saying that we have to wipe out game A. We need to go into game B, something totally different. But of course, it's really a synthetic combination of them, because they're cherry picking the parts of game A that they like, and in order to negate game B, right? This is the Alhaven in the synthetic process. So then they say, okay, so the next emerging world order, various systems we have tried in the 20th century are not capable of tackling the new crises that face us. We urgently need to evolve new solutions while keeping the best of the old. The regenerative movement, regenerative is another really big buzzword, and it's also a big buzzword for the UN and a lot of the, aligning NGOs and think tanks. So they talk about regenerative. Charter cities, they want to build charter cities, game B charter cities, and I will point out that that's also just very kind of paradoxical to what they talk about, things being decentralized. They talk about how it will be, kind of organic bottom-up growth, and again, very decentralized. However, charter schools all have government funding. So again, we're talking about top-down institutions. So that seems kind of antithetical to what they claim they want to see. But they do have a whole, Jim Rutt in his Journey to Game B lays out how people should be building charter schools for Game B. He doesn't say indoctrination, but that's what it sounds like to me. Okay, so where do we go here? So we have new evolving solutions, right? So many possibilities are being tried. Concepts such as cosmolocalism, new economic zones, regenerative movement, charter cities, and understanding of game theory may provide a way forward, but they need to be tried and tested. The Game B community, we experiment with these and many more. And yet no one knows what will actually work, right? Again, they don't really have any solutions, or how the next order will unfold. We need to try out every good idea, find the ones that work, and scale up, and we have already begun. Come play with us as we grow wiser together. And a lot of this is based on game theory. Everything is, they're gaming things out. But I think this idea of game theory is also trying to kind of precondition people to be in an AI world society where everything is kind of like we're just players in this game, and then we just get various tokens, in this game. So I think that is kind of what they're trying to precondition when they keep using these terms and this the framework of gaming. All right, so that was, let me see, let me go back here. So I went through a lot of this. Let's go to the GameBee wiki. So I'm on their GameBee wiki site, which does have a lot of information that is public. So then they laid out in 4 quadrants, and I just noticed this is like very popular amongst the what they call futurists. Some of you may be familiar with the Operation Lockstep document. This was from a larger document. It was page 16 to 26 of a larger document that was in conjunction with Johns Hopkins, the Rockefellers, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and it was called Scenarios from a Technological Future. And the Operation Lockstep, as I said, was from 16 to 26 of this larger, more than 100-page document. But what they had in there was 4 various types of scenarios that could play out, that they were wargaming, if you will. And it was some of the other ones were like Hack Attack, and but Operation Lockstep is the one that is very familiar to a lot of people, because a lot of people have said that it was very reminiscent and looked a lot like what occurred in 2020 with that whole experience. So yeah, but so they used, but if you really read that document, it really was a hybrid of all of them. There were elements of all of them that I think were utilized, but Operation Lockstep does look very familiar. But in any case, but if you're familiar with Kenneth Wilber, who's another one of these GameBee proponents, and you'll see that his name is listed on the people. He has his integral theory, which is very reminiscent of course, Eric Weinstein, another proponent, the theory of everything, and it's he also talks about 4 quadrants, right? Okay, so let's so the 4 quadrants are the projects, the resources, the people, and the concepts. And let's start with the people. They have 75 people that they have listed here. And I think a lot of these names will probably be familiar to you. There's, of course, Brett Weinstein is there, Cadell Last is there, Daniel Schmachtenberger. Daniel Schmachtenberger. We're going to go through some of these names, but not all. Eric Weinstein, Forrest Landry. Some of these are, names that have been really circulating on very prominent podcasts like Joe Rogan's podcast, certainly the Intellectual Dark Web. Many of them have their own shows. Of course, Jim Rutt is over there. John Vervaeke, Jordan Peterson, Jordan Hall. And Jordan Hall was one of the originals, along with Jim Rutt and Brett Weinstein. He was at a lot of those initial meetings. Nora Bateson. Now, I recently found out that, so I wasn't that surprised to find out that Nora Bateson, of course, is the daughter of Gregory Bateson, so that name should sound familiar to you. But I wasn't that surprised to find out that she's a member of the Club of Rome. But I was very surprised to find out, and we'll get to his name at the bottom, but if you remember the third of David Temple, the cosmoerotic humanist who was a disciple of Barbara Marx Hubbard, he, as of last year, in 2024, became inducted into the Club of Rome. I find that all very interesting. So Peter Limber, he is I think he's behind the Stoa Network, which hosts that film that I'm going to be showing a clip from. It's a longer film. I won't play the whole thing. I'm going to play like half of it, which is still long, but I think it's important for you to get kind of the concept. And then if you are intrigued or want to learn more, you can watch the whole film for yourself. But after we watch it, we'll go through some of the names behind that film. And a lot of them are repeats of what we see here. And then, of course, Tyson Yunkaporta, Tristan Harris, he was recently on Joe Rogan, Zachary Stein. So All right, so those are the names of some of the people. Of course, there's 75. I just highlighted some that I thought would be very familiar to a lot of you here. Let's go to what are some of the projects that they talk about. Um, so let's see, I had outlined just a couple because again, there's just so much and I didn't want to pick up, you know, too many hours here. Let's see where some of the, I'm scrolling through my notes. I have a lot here. Sorry. Hang on. Did I outline these? Okay, so a couple of the ones that I thought would be just, and again, you can go right to this and just click on each one. And, you know, I always hope that people don't take my word for things, and this is just a launching pad for you to do your own research. But, you know, just to give you like an overview of context. Okay, so they start with the ARC, which I just thought was interesting. Same name as Jordan Peterson's ARC. I don't know that it has any relationship, but I thought it was interesting. It's the Arch-Disciplinary Research Center, and their focus is on metamodernism. Remember, I said that was a big term for them, and they say it's a cultural synthesis between modernism and postmodernism. And so that's their focus at that research center. The Buddhist Geeks. The Buddhist Geeks is a story about what comes after modernity. So, of course, this metamodernism. And it's a story that's still being written, of course, about how the species will respond to the multiple overlapping crises, the meta-crisis that we are, of course, now facing. And the meta-crisis is an ecological crisis. So this dovetails very nicely into the climate narrative, climate crisis narrative. An educational crisis, of course, because if we're having an educational crisis, they can redictate the platform of education and recreate that and create a re-educational camp, if you will. Crisis of identity, of course. So now we are going to become Homo universalis, and that will be our new identity. It is a collective identity. A crisis of relationship, our relationship with each other and with the earth. At this point, the meta-crisis far outstrips our capacity to respond. So we must ask ourselves, what does the Buddhist story have to offer in the age of the Anthropocene, the age of the network? Cosmoerotic human. This is the couple of themes that just screamed at me out of that are the cosmoerotic humanism, writing a new story, and of course the network state. Okay, so the Civium Project, which is an initiative by Jordan Hall. We can get into that a little bit later, but Jordan Hall, of course, was one of the pioneers of this game B, and that is all about manifesting the previous 2 decades of his work to explore the future of civilization. So they're going to redefine what civilization is. And then do they have the, what was it, the Monastic Academy? And to me, that's a really just is a new modern iteration on the ancient Neoplatonic esoteric teachings. And it's this whole idea that we are coming from source and the one, and that we need to return to the undifferentiated all, essentially. And that's the Monastic Academy, Prospectiva, and I just brought that one up because I thought it was really funny when you go and look at what they outlined there. They actually talk about praxis and they say how it's a major theme in their work. So they're literally telling you that they're creating praxites and indoctrinating you. Sociocracy for all. And I thought this one was pretty important because they do keep talking about how there are a lot of new frameworks for governance that they talk about in Game B. So some of them are like crowdocracy, synergistic democracy, which is very much in the spirit of Barbara Marx Hubbard. They talk about, Jim Rutt talks a lot about liquid democracy, and this is very much in the same vein of a lot of the political movements, that I have referenced, like the Emancipation Party, the One Nation Party, the, what was it, Independent, United Party. So all of these different political movements. And what is it? It's an alternative model for governance that is focused on self-governance. They claim that it's a self-governing doctrine, but it looks a little bit more like a, kind of a mob democracy using technology. But it's focused on values of equality, but I think they really mean equity. They say, why is it important? Moving away from central governing systems is important for creating anti-fragile groups and society. This could be one possibility. And this is another term they use a lot, anti-fragile. And again, I find that just really interesting, because how can something be that decentralized and be anti-fragile? This sounds a little bit paradoxical. The alternative definition is a system of governance which seeks to create psychologically safe environments, right? So again, this is the anti-fragile concept. And we saw this out of a lot of the, I'm blanking on her name, but didn't she write the book on anti-fragility? I'm blanking, it'll come to me. But psychologically safe environments and productive organizations using constant. Constant is used instead of consent is used instead of majority voting in the discussion and decision making people who have shared objective or work processes. So, okay, so this is where, like, they keep talking about decentralization and how it is all about individual agency, but yet everything they talk about is also about the collective and about consent. And we remember somebody else talked a lot about consent, and his name was Edward Bernays, right? And he talked about manufacturing consent. So that's kind of where I thought that was an important concept to bring up. What other ones? All right, I think we'll go back to the different projects. You can go through the list. I think that might be all that I'll point out for now. Oh, Together Tech. We just see a constant theme. The Stoa, the Jim Rutt Show. But yeah, there's a constant theme. There's the Tomorrowland, where they keep talking about togetherness. And we'll see that in one of the technological frameworks that they discuss. They created a whole community of Tomorrowland and Togetherland. But there's also Better Together. There are a bunch of these. So it's again, this collaborative, collectivist type of communities. All right, so let's go back up. What do we have? I think maybe we'll, I had a couple of other people that I was going to point out, but I think maybe we'll just go to the Game B video. So they had this video that was done on the Stoa network, and it's called oh, should I go through him first? Okay. So one of the people I was going to point out was Forrest Landry. And he's a big person in the Game B community. He was like a woodworker, and he does these, they're called Magic Flight. It's just like a product that he's patented. And I guess that was kind of an outgrowth of his woodworking skills that he uses in order to spread his messaging. And he became very involved in large-scale software systems design and development of IDW. And that's not intellectual dark web. That is intelligence and data warehouse. He worked on several federal and unclassified as well systems, including this IDW. And then it was part of the work that he did there was part of his broader work across various governmental projects, which also included FBI investigative projects, TSC, which is Terrorist Screening Center, of course, DARPA, and Library of Congress Congressional Records System. And yeah, he's met the CEO of Magic Flight. And this involvement appears to be one of his many engagements in significant system design roles, focusing on how software applications and techniques can influence management of complex systems. We see that a lot, the complex systems. And the thing that just keeps screaming out at me is Nietzsche's quote, they muddy the water to make it appear deep. So everything has to be very complex. It's just way too complicated for us to understand. However, the specifics of his contributions to the IDW are not detailed in the public sources. They keep saying everything's so transparent, but a lot of their stuff is behind closed doors. But I think in this case it is because he was involved in a lot of classified works. I wanted to point him out. I don't think he was involved in the Game B video. It's this initiation to Game B. But one of the reasons I wanted to point him out is because I think a lot of the pushback that I've gotten when I talk about this Game B stuff, because I know a lot of people just aren't that familiar with it yet. And it's not because it's new, as I pointed out. They were talking about this in 2011. So it's really not a new concept, and it's not like they tabled it, because as of yesterday, Jim Rutt is asking his Facebook community if he should buy the domain. So, it's been going on for a while, and it's still very relevant. But I think a lot of people have this idea that these things are fringe. And Silicon Valley is not fringe. There's big money behind Silicon Valley. And clearly, a lot of these people have some very insider connections. This guy has worked on classified documents. He's involved with DARPA. So the whole military industrial complex, a lot of governmental structure. So I think I just wanted to point out that a lot of these people have major ties, as I pointed out, Club of Rome, to these big NGOs, to these military industrial complex organizations, and to big companies in Silicon Valley. So, all right, let's play this video, and it's the second half of it where they talk about Game B. I do encourage people on their own to go watch the whole video.
Whoa! Is this Game B?
The story of Game B is not yet written nor guaranteed, but its potential is real. Now more than ever, the world needs our creativity and stewardship to create the conditions for life to thrive.
The challenges that face humanity are far too complex for one person or tribe to fathom. The crises we see, ecological, political, social, and educational, are interconnected. To face this meta-crisis, we must consciously revitalize our tribe's special ability to adapt quickly with a co-creative strategy of culture. And we must do so in a bioregional mesh network across the globe. Restoring this co-creative engine to the human tribe will once again allow cooperation to outcompete competition, leading to an exodus out of Game A.
Therefore, by the rules of Game B, the meta-crisis cannot be solved by a single tribe or ideology. The key is to expand our intertribal cooperation to the global scale, and for this, we will need open and decentralized access to our Game A technologies, along with a culture rejuvenated by wholeness. Nature creates humans, humans create technology, and technology must be used to support the integrity of nature.
Game A's strategy of driving rivalrous innovation and production while continuing extraction must come to an end.
At the heart of this co-creative strategy of culture is a space to rediscover each other and our relationship with nature. As we learn about our role as stewards, we will revive the principles of wholeness and regeneration. Like our own bodies, the Game B tribe must protect the heart.
We start by acting locally while thinking globally. Like our nomadic ancestors, our economies become bioregional. This time, however, they are interconnected by a global mesh with the assistance of our technology.
Tribe selection is the driving force of human evolution. What will distinguish us from our nomadic ancestors is our cooperation on all scales, from the individual player, to the neighborhood, to the village, to the tribe, to the city, to the bioregion, to the globe. and someday across the galaxy. Like the fungal networks beneath our feet, a rich system of channels for cooperation and movement will enable us to respond to the global challenges we face.
The work required to achieve this vision is today incomprehensible.
But it is time to play.
Every day you must return to the symbol of wholeness to loosen the parasite's grasp. By keeping your wisdom centers open, you can let go of your conditioned ways of being. Lead with your strengths and find others who are committed to do the same. Make sure that your tribe has strengths in all three forms of wisdom and that you respect each other's roles. Then and only then can you start to play Game B.
There is a future of thriving that awaits us. It would be a shame to miss it.
All right. So I mean,
Wait, she has to take the red pill, right?
sort of.
The red token pill.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I wanted to have you see that ending because they already have an NFTs for the film. Let me see if I can find that page too. I don't know where I have that, but all right, I'll find it in a second. But yeah, they go through like on the website for the film, and they talk about how they have like an NFTs for Game B, and so already they're building their tokenized economy, the community, where you have a built-in currency using these blockchain technologies, and I know a lot of people are big fans of like crypto, like Bitcoin, and they advocate it as it being very decentralized. So I'll just point out they keep talking about how it's decentralized, but none of this looks decentralized. It's decentralized in the sense that it's quote unquote private, but you can be locked out of a private wallet, right? I mean, you could be locked out just because you forget your passwords, but you could also be locked out because you didn't meet the social credit rating of that group. And when we're looking at a lot of what they're talking about, this really looks to me like not just private, but private-public partnerships. And when you start looking at some of the companies that people like Peter Thiel are involved in, and then you start looking at concepts like the network state, it just starts building a picture to me that doesn't make me so comfy cozy. So I'm not saying that there's not a world where like decentralized technology could be beneficial, but again, you look at who's using it, who's building it, who's programming it, and that'll often tell you where it might lead and what problems might arise. So I thought we would go through just to give you a sense of who some of the people are who, when you look at the this initiation to Game B, I also think just even how they frame that. So the film itself, I think there was a lot of critiques. There was this whole podcast done. There was a series actually with the Dark Renaissance group and the Game B builders, and the Dark Renaissance community. They're like they have a podcast too. They very much critiqued the film, and they're a lot of their critiques were from less of a conceptual perspective, and a lot more, although they had some conceptual critiques, but a lot of it was more about the artwork itself. It didn't feel like it was very artistic. Now, I will say, I think actually it was very aligned with what we see in movie making today. There's very little character development. That was actually one of the critiques, and I agree with that. There's very little character development. It's cinematically, visually impressive, but in a very CGI, AI now way. A lot of like colors and So I think that, from that perspective, it depends on what you view as art and what you aesthetically appreciate. But it was very much in the vein of what we see, the direction we see things going in today. I don't see a whole lot of films today, and that's actually my background. I was a actress and producer. So I don't see a lot today. And it's mostly because, I come from a theater background. I had a theater company. And what I liked about the entertainment medium of whether it be film, theater, was the storytelling about humans, it being character driven. And that was always kind of my passion. Really just being able to, access the experiences of humans that I personally would not have the ability to do myself, because I can't be inside everyone's, physical form, nor can I even be, there are many places I will never experience. So, or in certainly
what I
time periods. So, yep.
what I found is that it has a target audience of people in their 30s and 40s, and I think they were capitalizing on the nostalgia quality of people who, as children, would have experienced that type of video game. And by just awakening that felt thought of you as the child, as a child, you have a more naive susceptibility or receptivity
Yes.
to messaging that you would not have. You don't have your critical thinking skills intact. So I think that there's a very, very sophisticated choice to take the path that they did, even though there's no character development in it. It's
Oh,
acting on a hypnotic phase state there.
I agree 100%. No, I think it was very well done. I think that it was very clever. It was the word I would use. In terms of like a cinematic filmmaking, I don't know that I appreciated it. But that's just because for that reason, I kind of could see the hypnotic suggestions and to me it looked very manipulative, but I agree with you. I think it would be very effective on who their audience is actually. And I think there's a lot of evidence to indicate that it has been very effective in luring in just exactly who they want to. But I thought we would go through and I could say a lot of things about the video itself. Maybe we'll do that more in the discussion, because I'd like to hear other people's thoughts on it too. But I think there's a lot to say just about it visually, about like the choices they made in what they chose to showcase, and the various characters, like what was it, the moan, and obviously monistic, and the different gurus that they had. But before I do, I think we can save that for maybe the discussion. And I wanted to go through some of the names behind the film. Obviously, I'm not going to go through all of them because there are so many. But I think I don't know how familiar everyone is with all of these people. And I think gives you a lot of context for who these people are and what their vision is. And the fact that they chose to do it now. Remember, Game B was a vision back in 2011. This film is 2 years ago. This is pretty recent. So I think they really understood that they have to appeal to people. They keep talking about transmedia. So they do understand that this is part of how they're going to bring people in. But I thought the choice of words, initiation, is very, very interesting. It does kind of seem a little bit cult-like. But I think it was very clever as well. So let's start with who Jim Rutt is, because he is the executive producer behind it. Of course, he's the main man behind this whole Game B. And he is an American businessman. He's an entrepreneur, a podcaster. He has his Jim Rutt Show, extensive involvement in the technology and internet sectors. And I think that's really important to understand, that because this is not just a philosophical concept. This is very much intertwined with technology. As I said, I really see this as kind of like a utopian utopian technological socialism. His early career and education, he received a bachelor's degree in management from MIT. I think that's also worth noting, because MIT seems to be very involved in all of these kind of think tank, military industrial complex type of social engineering projects. I don't really know how else to say it. But yes, so his early career involved in running technology operations for the Thomson Corporation. Network Solutions. He's notably recognized for being the CEO of Network Solutions, an American technology an internet company. He was hired in 1999 during the dot-com boom, and he played a crucial role in negotiating the company's $15 billion acquisition by VeriSign. When it continued to operate as an independent subsidiary, he then left his position in 2001. So, as I had mentioned before, he's the chairman of the Santa Fe Institute. He was, and that was after his tenure at the Network Solution. He served as the chairman of the Santa Fe Institute, which is a multidisciplinary research and educational institution focused on the study of complex systems. He was involved in the institute from 2002 to 2012, contributing to research areas like complexity science, consciousness, and artificial general intelligence. And I do think there is a lot of continuity between, as Matt pointed out in the very beginning, with cybernetics. Also worth noting, and I don't think I have this link, but they are now reviving the Macy conferences. They call them the new Macy, and they have a whole website. They have a lot of videos on their site. And I think that's just very interesting that they're working on that right now. Because it does seem like we already know, I mean, there's so many documents, like one I point a lot of people to is out of NATO. They did this cognitive warfare document, and they talk about how they're using the cybernetic feedback loops of social media. And so the fact that they're rebuilding the Macy conferences, which they call the new Cybernetics Institute. I think it's the new Cybernetics Associations. I'll find it, but I think that's definitely, I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so he has the podcast, and he brings a lot of these Game B thinkers on his podcast, and you can go look through. There's hours and hours. I did not clip a bunch of them. I didn't want to bore you with the amount of hours I've watched, but certainly feel free to do that on your own. Game B, of course, he's the pioneer behind this concept of Game B, which is an idea exploring new societal structures and ways of thinking that contrast the current Game A system, which is seen as an unsustainable and competitive. Game B focuses on cooperation, emergence, and long-term sustainability. And some of his other contributions, he's been involved in various other ventures, including founding or playing key roles in information services and network companies like The Source, Business Research Corp, and Market Switch. And he is also known, this is interesting, he's known for coining the term snail mail. I didn't know that, but I guess as a contrast to email, snail mail. And his public roles in post-retirement, he was appointed to the New Mexico governor to serve as by the New Mexico governor to serve as the state investment counsel. And he has also been involved in the creation of market spaces and community projects in Stanton, Virginia. And of course, like the Stanton meetings, of which Game B was born out of. So that is Jim Rutt. Then there is Jake Ruiz. And he is kind of the creative behind this Game B video. And he's got a company called Futurity. They all seem to vision themselves futurists. And if you look on his page, his LinkedIn page, he talks about how his passion lies at the intersection of design, media, technology, and futurism, and integral studies. Here, I integrate over a decade of theory and practice to co-create. So you see they use a lot of the same language of co-creation that we saw in the film, and that we've heard from people like Barbara Marx Hubbard and her disciples. With an eye towards the future, I am well versed in the tools of media production, communication, and have helped organizations achieve their purpose by aligning their brand with their highest virtues. My work in creative direction, storytelling brings a sense of fulfillment. He goes on. I won't read too much of that, but you can check him out. But he's kind of the creative behind it. Then one of the other creatives is Jeff Gomez. He's the CEO of Starlight Runner Entertainment, and I thought this was interesting because when I looked him up, I found him as a strategic advisor to the U.S. Department of State. Transmedia population activation projects in Afghanistan, Mexico, Colombia, and other nations, collective journey narrative modality. reduction of externist criminal and corruption activities through multi-platform narratives, global geopolitical narratives. So yeah, he's the CEO of Starlight Runner, leading experts in the field of brand narrative, story world development, creative franchise design, transmedia storytelling. And this is something they talk a lot about across all of these podcasts, and they have these discussions about transmedia storytelling. And Game B is going to emerge through that. He specializes in the expansion of entertainment properties, premium brands, socio-political themes into highly successful multi-platform communication and international campaign. He's been an accredited producer of the Producers Guild. He develops the story worlds of film, TV shows, video games, toys, books, comics, apps, virtual reality projects, and theme park attractions. So again, this whole transmedia kind of world. So yeah, so you can read more about him, and he's been involved kind of all over the world. His transmedia methods have been applied to educational and geopolitical causes, accelerating positive self-organized, social movements, increasing resistance to crime, violence, corruption, and the applications of his collective journey and transmedia population activation models have been helped to use to optimize communications for large NGOs and address crises, they say, in Mexico, Colombia, Australia, and the Middle East, North Africa region. And we saw that above when he worked for the State Department.
Quick, is that
So then
transmedia or trans? Okay,
Yeah.
transmedia. Okay.
Transmedia. So it's a concept of where they this idea of storytelling across all mediums. So that it's no longer about like a film or a TV show or a book. That now they're gonna incorporate it into multiple various mediums. So like virtual reality mediums as well as video games, and but they still do films and all of those other things too. So then we've got Jordan Greenhall. He's the one who redefined sovereignty. So he's decided sovereignty, and I'll just, before I forget it, I will find that because I probably will forget it. Let me see if I can find where he gives what his definition of sovereignty is. Right. So he writes this essay that's called On Sovereignty, and this is in his I believe it's his Medium channel that's called Deep Code, and I'll just read that because I don't want to forget it. So he talks a lot about Jordan Peterson and this whole essay, and he kind of justifies why he's bringing Jordan Peterson into it. And he says that normally I would not, think things like clean your room have much value in the landscape of what I talk about, but he then goes on to say why it actually does. And it's because of the word sovereignty. And he says, by sovereignty, I do not mean the notion that nation states have the right to self-determination on the geopolitical stage. Interesting. Okay. I do not mean that human individuals are magically able to separate themselves from the rest of the human world and make up their own rules. Okay, we have no individual agency. I mean something very specific, very central to being in the world, and if properly understood, very empowering. So again, just another little interjection. It's also interesting that he was originally Jordan Greenhall. He is now Jordan Hall. I don't know the story of why he changed his name, but he did change his name, although he still uses like in parentheses Greenhall a lot of times. But he was about a year ago, converted to Christianity. Now I hope that that's a genuine kind of, it's not for me to judge anybody's religious or spiritual path, but I find it very interesting that this guy who does not believe we have any free will, essentially, and who talks about a lot of concepts that are much more aligned with evolving perennialism than of what I know of Christianity. It's very interesting to me that he's recently converted, but really my reason for bringing it up is not to pass any judgment. I wish him the best on his, religious path. But it is just interesting when you see a lot of these people who've recently converted, like, Candace Owens and Russell Brand, and they're all talking about things like Christ consciousness, which from my understanding, Christianity has nothing to do with Christianity. So I just thought that was very interesting. I did watch, he'd done a podcast with Jim Rutt talking about his conversion. And so you can watch that and, discern your own opinions on that and watch his journey. But anyway, so that's his feeling on sovereignty. He says sovereignty is the capacity to take responsibility. It is the ability, he must have a different definition of responsibility than the one I know as well. It's the ability to be present in the world and to respond to the world, rather than to be overwhelmed or merely reactive. Sovereignty is to be a conscious agent. And I think when he talks about consciousness, he is talking about this kind of conscious evolution, not, individual separate consciousness. And then he says this, your ability to make sense of the world. So this is very intertwined with a concept that Jim Rutt and a bunch of the other Game B advocates talk about, where they say how we need to, this is really the sense making. And it is this idea of coming to kind of a collective understanding of the world, and that we have to explore everything with curiosity. Now, I'm a very curious person. I certainly advocate people being curious and investigating. But really what they're addressing is that a lot of people have fear. So if you get rid of all the fear, then you're much more suggestible, right? So you're much more likely to take on this concept of Game B and this collective intelligence that they're promoting. So yes, I don't know if I said whole earth was, that was Stuart Brand's. I might have stated it wrong in the beginning, but okay, so we'll get back to that in a bit. But yes, we'll go back to who is Jordan Greenhall, and he's a Harvard grad. He is the co-founder of the Civium Project. What are some of his other, I won't read all about him, but he's kind of seems to be like the tech guru of the Game B proponents. So Civium Project is redefining civilization, and he has a whole article on that on his Deep Code. This was the other thing. So he is also a co-founder and executive chairman of Qualia Life Sciences. Now, Qualia is a project with Tristan Harris, who's recently on Joe Rogan, with Daniel Schmachtenberger, who's also a founder of this Qualia Life Sciences. And Qualia is an interesting philosophical term to describe like the essence of something. It's like the essence of an experience. It's just interesting they've chosen to use this word. I think it's very, very intentional, because originally the company was called Neurohacker Collective. Neurohacker Collective. And it looks pretty benign. It's all about kind of like nootropics and enhancing your neurobiology. It does look like it's got a bit of a transhumanist bent. A lot of these things are usually couched in longevity. Then they talk about how they're conscious creators, so they're co-creating together. So that he's also, of course, the co-founder of Game B. This is right on his LinkedIn, so really easy to find all this stuff. And then you can go look into some of the other things that he has done. He also is has a law degree from Harvard. So, all right, so that is Jordan Hall. Then we've got Daniel Schmachtenberger. Let's see, what do we have about him on his page? Again, he's a co-founder of this formerly known as the Neurohacker Collective, and it's now Qualia Life Sciences. He is the founder of the Civilization Research Institute in Asheville, North Carolina. He is a founder of the Consilience Project. So the Consilience Project is very interesting to me, because the first time I came upon the Consilience Project, and I wish I had I can't find it anymore, but the page I found, but the logo was so distinctive that I recognized it immediately when it came up in the Game B research. But I first found it when I was doing my research on the NACs, and they were one of the like kind of sub partners on this project with the what was it, the IEG, the Intrinsic Exchange Group. The Intrinsic Exchange Group was specifically created to partner with the New York Stock Exchange to create the proposal for the SEC to create the separate category of the natural asset companies. Okay, so this is the Consilience Project, and they say that it's, again, a transmedia body of social theory and philosophy that explains the and seeks challenges to and solutions to the let me say that again. Explains and seeks solutions to the unique challenges we face today. It focuses on the deeper and greater functions beneath the world's major problem, drawing on the best of social theory while showing where the existing theories and institutions are no longer adequate to fix the current problem landscape. The aim of this project is to help catalyze a cultural enlightenment that will develop a new set of shared values and capacities adequate to the needs of our time. So yeah, then he was also the co-founder of the Civilization Research Institute, and again, to support the emergence of a mature global civilization, all these emerging properties. And he's a researcher there. So, okay, Daniel Schmachtenberger, he does a lot of work with Mark Gaffney and Zach Stein, and you can watch hours and hours of podcasts between all of them. All right, then we've got this Tyson Yunkaporta, and he is a senior research fellow at the Deakin Research, and he is an author. He has a what his book was, what is it, Right Story, Wrong Story, Adventures in Indigenous Thinking, a book by him. And I thought this is interesting because, and you can see this kind of in the Initiation to Game B video, they do hearken to this very indigenous type of culture, how that is somehow better. Now, I'm not to say that there aren't wonderful, properties of these indigenous cultures, and I certainly think that they should be left to do what they do. But I think there is this kind of push. It's a little bit of a nudging that I'm seeing, and I could be wrong. This is just what I'm seeing, to create this. It's called, like these exit building communities that are very reminiscent of indigenous cultures. And this is based on I'm totally blanking on his name right now, but he wrote a book about it, and it's an economic theory. I have it in my show. I'm sorry that I'm blanking on this one, but I'll find him. And but it's this very much this idea that you're gonna create these like off-grid communities, and I think that they're easy to kind of co-opt and usurped, and I don't know. To me, it looks a little bit of like a nudging for a social engineering project. So that's just interesting. That's what he's doing, and it's interesting that that's kind of what they're advocating in this. They're kind of propping them up in this Initiation to Game B video as somehow they're better than all of us who are in Game A, and we're the civilized, industrialized people, right? We need to move into the age of Aquarius and move out of that. So. Yeah, so he's an author, educator, thinker, traditional wood carving, a lot of woodworkers in this movement, a researcher and a poet, Alpec Clan forever. He responds to as many messages as he can, but he doesn't have any other socials other than this one. So I've watched, he's on a lot of these podcasts with them, and he's an interesting character. But so I think that he's brought a lot of that aspect to that video that we saw. All right, so let's see, where are the next ones? We've got Nora Basin, who, as I said, is a member of the Club of Rome. I do think that's worth noting. She is a director. She's, of course, the daughter of Gregory Bateson, who was involved in the MK Ultra projects. And I don't think that needs further explanation to this audience. She's the director of research and exhibition internal Bateson Institute. So she continues a lot of her father's work. Warm data, Simasthi, I don't know, I can't even pronounce all these things, aphianosis and readying. And for her about, she quotes her father. She says, the major problems in the world are a result of the difference between how nature works and the way people think. All right, so I think it's very interesting that they brought her in. She is a director and a filmmaker as well, so they do, bring her in on that as well. So transcontextual research is something she's very involved in, and they say the International Basin Institute is a new kind of research institute whose aim is to incubate projects that seek to describe how interactions in complex systems interlink. We are developing information which will increase our ability to take into account multi-layered integrity and define living systems. That is Nora Bateson. And then, of course, we have Zach Stein, who I did not realize was a member of the Club of Rome. He was inducted as of 2024. He was also, of course, the 1/3 of David Temple, the what's it called? The Cosmoerotic Humanism Project. He's a co-founder of the Consilience Project. And I'm sorry, Matt, I didn't see what you had just posted. Was it relevant to this, what you're pointing out, or sorry?
Oh, no, that was in regards to
Okay, I'll go along.
somebody in the audience who asked a question about where is Game B in
Okay.
Russia and China. So I was just throwing in a few things to the audience.
Okay, great. So then, so that's Zach Stein, and so then we have Mark Allen Kaplan. And I think we only have a couple more, so I'm going to try and go through them fairly quickly. My previous work in the domains of art, media, technology, and consciousness still lives with me, yet all the frames in which I have held this work are deconstructing. And he says, oh shoot, I lost all of that. Where did it go? Okay, so he says, what is art now that AI is generating a wild new stream of art out of the collective consciousness of humanity? What is media now when there are so many forms overlapping and intermingling with themselves and other previous non-media domains? What is technology when it is transcending all the previous boundaries and becoming alive in strange ways? What is consciousness when our human world appears to be going mad while our machines start to think like us? And his page is pretty interesting. He talks about, he's announcing the launch of the, let me see if I can find him. He announcing the launch of the Lived Inquiry Meta Lab. And where he has this, yeah, so that what I was just reading was right from that page. So you can go look at his work. He's interesting. All right, and then we've got, who else do we have in this? We've got Alexander Biener, and he also has a Medium page. He's the co-founder of Rebel Wisdom. I find very interesting. They all have Medium pages, and I don't know if there's some sort of affiliation with Medium, but they do all have these very lengthy Medium. That seems, and there's so many other platforms to write articles, so I just found that interesting. Of course, we have Brett Weinstein, and I'm not sure that I need to do a full explainer of him. I think this audience is pretty familiar with Brett Weinstein. But yeah, his page is Audacity, Tenacity, and Veracity. He's, of course, one of the founding members of the intellectual dark web. We talked about him with his Phoenixing the Republic. He's an evolutionary biologist by trade. And of course, the host of the Dark Horse podcast, and they call it the Dark Horse Think Tank. So that's him. I don't think he needs too much of an introduction to, yeah. Peter Wang is the founder of Anaconda, and that's the birthplace of the Python data science. We are not just a company, we are a movement. Anaconda sits at the center of the AI revolution. We provide data science tools, MLOps, and data and model management to empower our customers and community with AI capabilities to propel their projects forward. All right, so that is, and of course there are more people who are involved in this project, but I just wanted to give you a sense of who they are, what their different backgrounds are, and how that all kind of funnels into and fuels this project. And now I'm going to play a video of some of these people who were involved talking about the film itself, and so you can kind of hear a little bit from the horse's mouth. So we'll see if we can find that.
Much, but it doesn't feel whole to me to think about a game B as not aligning with that kind of energy. It's funny actually. I submitted this script to Jim the first time, and he was truly shocked and baffled, and then he said, give it another round and just see what you can do with it. And I said, well, how about I just write a completely separate film, a completely different idea. And it was very pathic. It was the opposite. It had some extreme kind of existential horror in it. But to me, that's got to be part of game B too, right? I mean, when I said in the beginning, this is a protopian vision, it includes the shittiness of life, right?
Yeah, I'd also like to add that I think a key consideration, remember, we are at the very tiny first baby steps of game B-hood here. We are tiny. Game A is huge and powerful, and all of us are completely saturated in what we've called game A malware, right? There's all kinds of fucked up shit in our heads. And, at least for me, when I watch the film, the pioneer's journey is, a whole lot about her kind of going, going back and forth between the possibility of game A and having the possibility of game B and having all this game A malware in her head represented by the parasite. And so, this kind of ugliness struck me, at least, as appropriate for a person who's just stepping out of the big and strong game A into the tiny, weak little game B.
Any of the other panelists?
Imagine creating videos.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot that we have to think about in terms of conveying these ideas, and the way to do that is a little bit different from the conventional way that we've been telling stories and expressing some of our artwork. I've been talking with Jordan and some of the others here in the room about new modalities of storytelling. Instead of the drama of conflict, can there be a drama of reconciliation? The excitement of attempting systemic change rather than wiping out the bad guy, the engagement that can be accomplished with participative narrative. We have technology that allows for dozens or hundreds or tens of thousands of people to contribute to the story, even to be credited for their contribution through things like blockchain. That's really exciting. It affords us new opportunities to convey some of the elements of the game B narrative. It's really exciting to me. In the past, guys, and I know this is a little Trojan horsey, but some pieces of popular entertainment are responsible really for changing attitudes and conversations about things like race and gender, all in the family. There was a soap opera that came from South America about a maid who was oppressed and who figured out how to educate herself through night school. And millions of women across South America in the late 1960s started to go to night school. Will and Grace started the conversation in the popular sensibility about being gay. we can do this with Game B narratives and Game B components. I'm pledged to. I'm going to tell you right here, I just sold something to the Walt Disney Company, and it is going to be shot through with Game B, you know, and I'm going to Trojan horse that thing right through the mouse's ass. So, you know, let's all try and do that if that's our inclination. There can be some Malcolm X's in the room. But if you
Trojan horse through the mouse's ass. This is how like Game B language is created. We're creating culture right here.
There you go.
Best meme ever.
Yeah, the graduate student of the future who's unraveling how Game B ended up being the world operating system, that'll turn out to be the pivotal moment in their dissertation.
So Daniel Schmachtenberger also says that the only way for Game B to work is that we need some cultural social engineering. So they all seem to be on the same page with this, that this needs to be a social engineering project, and if we have to Trojan horse it, we will. Seems to be a shared consensus amongst them. I did want to back up a bit because I couldn't find the Emancipation Party website before. When Jimrod had linked it, and then he linked it again, and one links works, one doesn't. So I'll just very quickly, in case you can find it yourself, but it is emancipationparty.org. So just a couple of things they talked about so people have an idea of what, because these are all concepts of Game B as well. Obviously, it was an outgrowth of the Emancipation Party, but they talk about free money, the free money systems, and new money not created through bank loans in a destructive combination of credit and money policy. Instead, when the economy expands and we need more money to keep prices stable, we will simply create more money and deposit it as social dividend in the amount of every citizen. And you can learn more about that. They talk about real transparency. This is a reform that will ensure all account transactions of legal entities and transactions and securities be world viewable. The buyer, the seller, the amount of the price of legal documentation will be available to all. The essence of real transparency must then be the ability to follow the money. And along with this, they do have something called like B Lab, B corporations. And I can go through that if people are interested. But this is like a new type of corporation that people can open, I guess kind of like an LLC, an S Corp. They have something called a B Corp. And there are already like thousands of companies across the world that are doing this. And some of them are very big names like Patagonia. And it is all aligned with the UN's like SDGs, essentially. They say that it's about like, you know, sustainability and showing that they have social responsibility. I don't remember the exact words, but that's what you need in order to meet the requirements of a B Corp. So, and this is not like a vision. This is actually in practice, and some of the biggest companies in the world are already structured as B Corps. So open finance, when they talk about the open finance, is eliminating the advantage the investment banks and hedge funds have over individual investors by revealing the financial information for everyone to see. Participation becomes open to everyone through peer-to-peer lending, crowdfunding, and simplified securities markets. So this is open finance. And a lot of the technologies and structures that they're talking about in Game B are very much aligned with that. They keep talking about peer-to-peer and DeFi, which is decentralized financials. They talk about smart tax. With one exception, we will eliminate all loopholes and deductions from the tax code. We will entirely eliminate the concept of a capital gains tax by eliminating two-tier taxation altogether. We will eliminate the payroll and shift estate taxes from the estate to the beneficiary. Clean democracy. They respond to our sullied system by creating a new kind of money. And I love how when you look at a lot of their documents, they claim that this has nothing to do with a new financial system, but everything they talk about seems to be about a new financial system. So I'm not sure which one it is, right? A new kind of money, a political money. $8.50 of which would be deposited into the account of every citizen every month. So UBI is like a big platform in this Emancipation Party, but also in the Game B. They talk about UBIs a lot. And then proposing a strict divide between public and private service and private benefit, and substantially curtailing any lobbying activity by elected officials. And they talk about citizenship wage. This reform will establish non-taxable citizenship wage of about $8,000 per adult. So this is essentially kind of like a UBI. Open creation, and this is within the context of the citizenship wage. Each citizen would receive $10 a month of special money. I'm not sure what that's supposed to buy, but can be used to fund the creation of intellectual property. Anything created under this program would be considered to be in the public domain, and this would be a first step towards the future of superabundance via the rise of what we call non-rivalrous economics. And the drug piece, Emancipation Party will seek the earliest possible end to the drug war. They're very big proponents of like psychedelic use and drugs. So they will immediately end federal prohibition of marijuana use and leave the question of legalizing to the states. Prohibition has been a failed policy of epic hypocrisy that spreads violence and corruption around the world. And then they talk about, of course, universal health care. So just wanted to go back to that because I didn't have the page before. Okay, so I know we've gone really long. How are people doing? Good.
People are
Okay.
cool. No, this is good. Just do your thing.
Okay. So then I feel like a lot of this it just seemed kind of conceptual. What really puts this into something that might be applicable is when you start looking at the technologies and the financial components of this. And so I wanted to talk maybe about, let me see before I do that. Okay, I've got all these technologies. Okay, yes, let's go into before I do that, there's just like 4 concepts that they call the core principles of Game B. So of course, decentralization, this applies to governance and decision making, should be distributed to prevent the concentration of power. Again, if you're familiar with things like the network state, and of course, again, also with just how technologies work, I don't really know how they're going to achieve that. I find that very, very curious, and I could be wrong. I keep getting told I just don't understand enough about how these technologies work, and that's entirely possible. But as soon as you start talking about things being interoperable, and as soon as you talk about them having any kind of like cohesive structure, I don't know how there is really this decentralization and where you really have this data privacy is what they keep talking about. But once you put it up there, I don't know how that is really realistic. Anti-rivalry, so of course where the whole anti-rivalry concept very much harkens back to a lot of what I keep seeing come up is a lot of the like Tavistock group dynamics and Esalen Institute, Landmark Forum. So there I did 2 offshoots of the of Landmark. I did one in LA, one in New York, and they actually play a bunch of these games that really, one of them, the one in LA, they actually talked about like game A versus game B. I mean, at the time, I had no idea. It was a kind of like a prisoner's dilemma type game, and you had the red team. You had the black team and the white team, and they were one was like, you know, kind of they kept saying it's a zero-sum game, and it was all about competition where you were incentivized to be rivalrous. And it's essentially like the prisoner's dilemma. And then the other one was all about, well, how can you all work together and be collaborative? So they were very much promoting this concept. And I've seen this, and again, I think this is also the age of Aquarius. They keep renaming these things, but these concepts are, you know, seem to be very very much in line with each other. I had recently seen it was like a Cirque performance, and it's called Dual Reality. And they literally acted out Game B. The talent was incredible. I used to be actually like a partner acrobatic instructor, and I'm an aerial acrobatic performer. So I love watching these things. I actually got to train with them when I was. This was a part of a trip that I saw this Dual Reality. It was on our honeymoon, and that I was on the monkey bars, and they were there, and they like let me join in on their training session. So I was really impressed. They were super talented, but they had it was dual reality, so it's like the red team and the blue team, and it's part of this figure I think figure 7, and this the choreographer, I think her last name is Shelley. I might have gotten it wrong, but she comes from Silicon Valley, and she now lives actually I think in Canada, but so they do this like acrobatic performance, and there's this red team and this blue team, and they're competing against each other, and the whole theme is that we have to end the competition. So one of the girls kind of like takes her shirt off, and she's wearing all black underneath, and then takes everybody else's shirt off, and they all have to come together, so there's no more competition. I'm like, oh my gosh, they literally just acted out Game B. So this theme of anti-rivalry is very pervasive. Sustainability, of course, we keep hearing that term. Emphasize ecological and economic systems that regenerate resources instead of depleting them. And it all sounds really great, but when I looked into the sustainability of what they were going to do for our environment with the natural asset companies, and of course this natural capital companies, what it all comes down natural capital accounting, what it all comes down to is the accountability. That's a big word they use a lot also, but how do you get the accountability? You get it through surveillance, and they have a bunch of these pharmacological technologies, and of course the USDA in the United States has already partnered billions of dollars with a lot of these technologies, and it's all in line with the UN agenda to meet their Agenda 2030 goals. So sustainability sounds great and regenerative and all of these. I mean, I personally prefer organic kind of agricultural practices, but I don't think that farmers should be subjected to being surveilled and having to opt into all of these technologies in order to reduce their carbon emissions, and that is what they're talking about. Emergence, leverage bottom-up adaptive and evolutionary practices to solve problems collaboratively. So again, we will be subsumed into the noosphere. The collective intelligence, again, more of the noosphere. Harness the power of shared knowledge and transparent communication. So it really does seem, this is where things get a little bit conceptual. When they talk about collective intelligence, they're talking about, so we already have, and this is where like the Web3 kind of, when they start talking about things like quantum computing, this is a little bit conceptual. It's not, we're not there yet, but their vision of where we're going is we have right now what they call Web 2. And it's also worth pointing out, I did do a video on this as a kind of just a brief overview, 1 hour for my radio hour on the 5th Industrial Revolution. So just to give you a little insight on this, many of you I'm sure have heard of the 4th Industrial Revolution. Klaus Schwab says that we're in the 4th Industrial Revolution, but now they're actually saying that we're already in the 5th Industrial Revolution, and they have mapped out what the 5th, 6th, and 7th Industrial Revolutions already look like. And the 5th Industrial Revolution is really this kind of interplay with the technology. And so it's kind of really and we're seeing this, right? We're seeing it with all of these language model technologies, the ChatGPT, the Groks, and how people are interfacing with that. And so then we have the 6th, but they always say it's human-centered. Now, this is a really important concept to understand, because what they mean by human-centered, and it took me a minute to kind of really fully grasp it, because I was like, well, that just seems like a bold-faced lie, because when you look at the frameworks that they're trying to construct with things like AI government, it sounds a little AI run. And of course, there are people programming that AI, but they do mean it because they're trying to extract from humans. So right now, when we're in the Web 2 technology, the internet, you know, and you have something like AI, it centralize, like it tries to collect from as much information as possibly has, and then create, you know, like kind of something that's a very short, cohesive presentation of that. But it is scouring from as much data as it possibly can get. Now, when you start talking about these more advanced stages, and then of course when we get into things like Web3 and we get into quantum computing, their vision is that it is a noosphere, a collective intelligence. So they believe that we have this kind of a shared, like a collective resonance. And of course they think technology can enhance this with things like HeartMath and the global coherence. So they're talking about extracting from human energy, and this is where like the 6G technologies come in. Now, they don't have this all worked out, but this is the vision, is that they're going to be drawing from our you know, biomagnetic electromagnetic frequency sphere. You know, that's what like Buckminster Fuller would call like the biosphere. They're going to extract from us with that to and then put it into a collective. And so that we have this kind of collective technological interface, but that it is drawing from us. And I don't know if I did a good job of explaining any of that. It is all very conceptual right now. The technology is not there. I do want to make that clear. But it is also important to understand that this is where they envision it and what they think will occur. So they're driving it. They want it to go there. Okay, so let's talk about some of these technologies. So what do we have? We've got, of course, they're big proponents of, you know, all the same kinds of like solar, wind, geothermal energy. They're a fan of all of that kind of those quote unquote sustainable types of technologies. They are big fans of cryptocurrencies, decentralized autonomous organizations, smart contracts. They keep talking about smart contracts, and smart contracts I think are very problematic. You know, it's kind of like you set the program and then it runs. So right now, if you and I engage into, like, I don't know, if all of us get, you know, engage into a contract, we can terminate that contract. We can amend that contract. You can't do that with a smart contract. It now becomes a autopilot, and it dictates everything. So it's a program that is created, and then that now has control over you. So I think that is very problematic. It sounds, you know, very efficient, and it's enticing to people who want things to be streamlined. But I do think there's a lot of problems with that. I think there's problems with it already for the people who are using it. And of course, when you start looking at it in a governance framework with smart cities, I think that becomes incredibly problematic. And, you know, of course, they keep saying that it's going to be so decentralized and people are going to have so much power. But what happens when you have a smart contract that's dictating all of the, you know, policies of that city? Then and you have robots who can come after you for violating any of the stipulations. That seems like that could be a nightmare. The community managed currencies. So this is again where I was talking about how people are concerned about, like, you know, central bank digital currencies, and I think that's very valid. But what happens when they're community managed currencies and you're still using technology and you still have to have a digital ID in order to enter and to be able to use it? So yeah, decentralized governance systems, and let me see, they talk about microgrids. I had mentioned already the agricultural technologies. You know, this is all about carbon sequestering and biodiversity, and I won't go too much into that. I've done several shows outlining that. We want more information on it. So precision agriculture, though, I do want to point out this is something that they talk about in Game B, and I'm very concerned about this precision agriculture, but I'm also very concerned about precision health management. And this is something that, like, Bobby Kennedy is actually a huge proponent of. Obama, you know, had launched this concept. I don't know if he launched the concept, but he was a big supporter. I think one of the first to kind of publicly talk about it in this country. But it is a derivative of a UN agenda, a UN initiative, and they talk about it in the AI World Society, where everybody's going to have biosensors in them. and then they will be able to use that for personalized targeting health prescriptions. And in theory, it may sound great to some people, but it also means that they have a lot of control. You know, right now they're doing a lot of data mining, and I'm totally guilty of it. I have, it's called a ring con is what I don't wear the Aura ring, but it's similar. You know, all this data culture, but they're mining this data right now, and I think whenever you have this the data mining, you have to recognize that there is also surveillance potential. And then they could also use that to implement some sorts of policies over you. Like, what if you didn't get enough steps today? Are you allowed to go back into your house? Or, if you didn't get enough magnesium today, you're forced to. I mean, I'm making up silly examples, but we can see where this could go wrong pretty quickly. And they're doing the same thing with farming. And it's, they're using AI. It's the Internet of Things. In the precision medicine, they're talking about the Internet of bio things and the Internet of nano bio things as well. So those are two kind of fields where that kind of technology is very relevant, and they're promoting it in Game B. Okay, let me see what else I have. I wanted to find my stuff on. I don't want to go through too many of the technology because there's like a million. But I think Web3 is just kind of a concept. Again, we're not fully there yet, but Web3 is what they envision the internet is going to become. And this is where all of these different technologies will become applicable, is in Web3. And they keep talking about the tokenization, which they say it allows for fractional ownership of assets, making it possible for more people to invest in high value assets like real estate or art without actually needing to buy the whole thing. I don't know how that's going to work out in real life application, but we already have something called estate law, and that's because families can't seem to agree on like co-owning things. But so now we're going to have this done through technology. They talk about they talk about peer-to-peer networking, the NFTs, we saw that in the video. Okay, so let's go to one of the companies that I thought was really interesting, was called NoMap. And they're talking about, they've renamed it. It's now called S7 Foundation. But again, the spelling of NoMap says everything. It's NOOMAP. So they do talk about inhabiting the Noosphere. And this was Christopher Larcombe, who spent quite a bit of his life in a mental institution, but now he decides there's no such thing as mental illness, and he's recreating. And he came up with this concept of NoMap, along with his wife, whose name's Andrea, and Andrea goes by Tan. I don't know why she goes by Tan, but that's her new name. So Andrea is interesting because she talks about, she's giving the speech when she's talking about the concept behind like this vision of the NoMap, which became S7, and she was presenting it to this F7 who invested a lot of money, and they merged. But she talked about how she just couldn't like work for the man anymore. I'm paraphrasing, but she didn't know what this new vision of life was going to look like, but she was going to create it, and then there were going to be co-creators with her. But really, it had to be something different than she just can't work for a living. And I don't know. I mean, I've read Marx, and it just kind of reminded me a lot of reading him, where he's just like, well, like people should just fund me. Like, none of us should have to work. But so this is the S7 Foundation, and I think, and they talk a lot about something called the holochains. And I think I have a little video on holochains. I might end with just playing that because I think it sums up kind of like everything. So the F7, was it Brett Warshawski? Yeah, and he, I think, is in this one. I hope I'm not getting these names confused here. So we have, it's a part now. It's opencollective.com is where you can find it. Their first thing they say is living peacefully, healthfully, free, super abundant future, one holon at a time. So yeah, this is they believe they created the hollow chains is a technology that they use, and I did a whole video on this too. The S7, it comes out of like the different like synergistic co-creators. I probably don't have what all 7 S's are on here, but I went through it in my last video, and I am sorry that I don't remember all of them, but they come right out of Barbara Marx Hubbard. So yes, they talk about how we're now we're living here now, in gift consciousness. So there's also, I guess before I play that video, let me see if I can find this list for you, because really what they are talking about is like a post-capitalist world. And so they keep talking about things like degrowth is one of their terms. A gift economy is another one of the terms that they use. Redistribution. Let me see if I can find all of the names, because there were a lot of them. I think, let's see if I can find this. Regenerative economic system is one of their terms. Circular economy is another one. I don't know if I have them all, but yeah, those are a bunch of them. So, but that is what it is. Yeah, so I don't know if we have that video from the, we can play that. I think that kind of sums it up. It explains it pretty well.
Hi, I'm Brett from the S7 Foundation. We're excited to share a brief introduction to the HoloWeb, an innovation that will revolutionize the internet and culture as we know it. The current web takes its design from books, pages, and encyclopedias, but this way of serving information has its limits. As information becomes more and more important in our lives, we can now imagine more evolved and exciting ways to play with it. It's time to get out of the chairs, get out of our virtual library, and break away from the mouse and scroll bar. Going from one website to another to find information can also be a thing of the past. The HoloWeb reimagines the web as a virtual world rather than a virtual library. It's a literal worldwide web that is organized in space, rather than mimicking the pages of a book. As we leap into the HoloWeb, a whole new web experience and reality will be unleashed. Data is stored in nodes or particles that we can grab hold of, shuffle around, mash together, and zoom in and out of. We can organize and view nodes in all kinds of 3D visual geometries, from globes and landscapes to maps and cubes, colors, animations, and shapes. And we can switch views for different purposes. It's the same data with different lenses. Searching and browsing through data is easier, faster, more intelligent, and much more fun. We can copy and reuse any amount of data in one shot. You can even send the whole of Wikipedia to someone if you wanted to. These new data formats make it possible to explore information in new, exciting ways using virtual reality, augmented reality, wearable technologies, and artificial intelligence. Let's get back into our bodies. The HoloWeb's unique innovation of a fractal database organizes all data into a superbrain, a type of giant global mind or brain-like network where everything is intelligently connected to itself. No more different logins to separate websites. Out with the search engine and in with the synergy engine. The synergy engine connects nodes like the brain does based on neural-like algorithms. Integrated blockchain and holochain technology will enable users to make their own contract and their own currencies without the need for middlemen. The HoloWeb is novel, and so is the way it will be built and launched. Its development will be outsourced through co-creation with different, trusted partners who have humanitarian goals as well as technology innovation in their hearts. The first HoloWeb apps, called Synapse, will create a regenerative new environment for social change and a cultural shift for millennials exploring new lifestyles. We imagine the first social network of a HoloWeb to actually be the last social network. One login where you can access your whole online life. The future social networker will be able to do it all from a centralized and decentralized platform. information sharing, trust building, messaging, project management, crowdfunding, blogging, shopping, and tons more. Users will be able to organize their entire online experience through one single portal. There are a myriad of applications, some ideas we are excited about. Geospace maps. Imagine walking down a street in your Google glasses and being able to see what resources and connections are in your vicinity based on your needs and your interests. 3D geometric maps. Enter virtual reality and view all of your information as a globe in outer space where you can reorganize your online filing cabinet as though you are playing a computer game. Quantum chat. Interconnect all of your different online conversations and store them for future use. Custom currencies. Set up your own currencies for your own community to allow new forms of trading and value recognition. You can exchange between communities in a synergistic decentralized exchange. These new and novel currencies will catalyze new forms of resource sharing, crowdfunding, self-organization, and economic models. These examples are just the tip of the iceberg of what's possible and just a small insight into what we are envisioning. We look forward to exploring with our partners their own ideas for different applications and harnessing the enormous creativity made possible through collaboration. The autumn of 2018 will see the launch of the first SynApp proposals, and the HoloWeb will move from prototype into development. A whole new world awaits.
All right, so I feel like that kind of, sums up a lot. Maybe, I don't know, there's one other thing I'll share, and then maybe we can just open it for discussion, because, I feel like it's all starting to blend. But I just saw this tweet, and it's from Lastos, but it says, introducing the new Bretton Woods project, led by Harvard students and alumni, NBW, leveraging the innovative BEL2 infrastructure, aims to develop a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin to address challenges in the global financial system. And then it says that the Harvard team launches the new Bretton Woods to tackle global debt crisis. I just thought, I literally just saw that now. So that does seem kind of relevant to everything we're discussing. But so I guess I'm trying to remember where Brett Warshawski and Tan, they're a couple, and it was NoMap, and it became S7. It was Christopher Larcombe that was involved with the holochains, and that is it's. But you saw how that concept is being used. So, all right, let's open it up.
Loved in that video how they introduced the feature of the Sin app to promote a new culture amongst millennials, and I can't help but see a sick joke behind the double entendre. No, that was epic, Courtney. That was exactly what I was hoping you would do. Really good, really good.
Thank you.
No, and like I said,
I feel like I left so much out, but there was a lot in there, so yeah.
No, it's fantastic, and I'm gonna try to get a contact who does transcripts to pull this together as well, because we should have a written version of this with the images spliced in as well as the video. I think that'd be really good.
Yes. Okay. Oh, so the 7 S's of co-creation are synergy, synchronicity, spontaneity, syntony, and there's actually a whole Substack on syntony. And there's one of them is Buckminster Fuller's Ghost or something like that. Syntropy, self-creativity, and then suprasex. Yes.
Suprasex?
Yes. So Barbara Marx Hubbard has this concept, and Mark Gaffney and Zach Stein and Daniel Schmachtenberger, they talk about this too. So Mark Gaffney actually has something called the Eros Mystery School, and he talks about how we have to revive the ancient mysteries, and he did a whole podcast with Aubrey Marcus, who's doing a lot of cross-promotion on that. But they talk about how Eros is not, it's not sexual. It is, even though that's what it means, but he refers to it more like agape love, which is strange because why wouldn't he use the term agape? But he says that it's like this radical immersion into this new story of cosmoerotic humanism, and it's a radical love affair with the universe, is what he says. But Barbara Marx Hubbard has this concept of super sex where it's like you're so inspired and invigorated with everyone and everything, and it becomes this kind of orgiastic experience. And yeah,
Is that Audrey Marcuse the same? Is that a relation to Herbert Marcuse, who did
Aubrey Marcus.
Oh,
Aubrey
Marcus.
Marcus.
Okay. I read that
Yeah,
very fast. I wasn't sure.
he's a very big podcaster. But no, but Marcuse, I feel like, is very relevant because there was Eros and Thanatos, which was Freud, and then of course
and he did the Eros and Civilization.
Civilization, yeah. So, and now we have Eros Mystery School. So.
Mm-hmm. No,
yes.
very. Yeah. That's it.
And Mark Gaffney is an interesting character. He did this video on an interview. What was it on? I think Dr. Phil, where they were talking about how he's been accused of a lot of underage type of activity and involvement. And his justification for this one particular was that she was 13 going on 30. And so therefore that made it okay. But you can watch that interview and assess for yourself your thoughts. So he's an interesting character. Yeah, that's Mark Gaffney. So.
All right, let's open her up. We have time for a limited amount of questions. Because I'm thinking maybe how's 30 minutes sound? Courtney, is that okay?
Great. Yeah.
You don't seem like you have a hard stop. All right, so maybe 40 minutes. We'll see. So we'll try to keep the questions that I ask people to keep them as sort of condensed as you possibly can. I know sometimes context is important, but do what you can. The first people I saw get in there was Arlen and Cynthia. I saw Sue. I see Brett. So let's do that with that arrangement so far. Arlen and Cynthia first. Are you still there?
Okay. Yeah, we are.
Oh, there you guys. Hey.
Yeah. Hello.
So first of all, wow, Courtney, fantastic. Thank you. And I'll just be brief because you could just comment on so much. But number one, you repeatedly have said that every time you talk about a certain topic, they will say, oh, well, you just don't understand or you just don't know enough, which is really just code for you actually do. And you're onto something, and they have to kind of, knock at you to shut you up. So always take that as I must be onto something here if they're doing that to me.
The typical technique of the narcissist, actually.
Yeah, but anyway, which then goes on to, psychopaths have infiltrated everything, and basically monologue and tell you what they're doing, and or point fingers at project, and which is basically when they say that people are money laundering, really it's that corporations and governments and all the stuff are actually the ones who are doing it. But anyway, okay, so then I want to I'm summing up all my notes. Matt's comment in the side there, where he said that there's a perversion of Christianity in terms of Jesus as a theosophical spirit. And what you see in this film, which I found to be quite repulsive.
The first one.
I find that very repulsive, which is my first red flag of just evil, is that everything is reduced. They always reduce and bring things up. So they reduce Jesus. They reduce spirituality. They pervert definitions, which we've read all about that in all the books. So when you see reductionists and the demeaning of free will and fundamental things, the definitions of these things. I don't know. A person, I've just spent how long is it? Over 2 hours being nauseous about all of this. What are we going to do?
Good job.
Anyway, so that's not all of it, but move along. Let's move along.
Okay, so I had a question then on right near the beginning. You talked about consent, so that this issue that this Plan B, or I can't even remember the name of the Plan B is something that's going to be imposed upon us, And so there's two things that come to mind about that. Number one, I have some ideas on it, but what are your ideas on removing that consent so that it can't just be steamrolled over you? Because I do know that, you know, if something is offered to you and you basically don't rebut that and say, no, I don't want it, then it can be assumed that you do want it, and that you will be given it whether you want it or not, because you haven't rebutted. You haven't said, I don't want that. So that's a question.
So my thoughts on this is that what's going to happen, and I think we're seeing a lot of this already. My example that I like to use a lot, because I think a lot of people can relate to this, is Facebook. I think what we're going to see is, and we're seeing it, is opt-in tyranny. So some of you may be familiar with something called LifeLog. LifeLog was a part of the, I believe it's part of Total Information Awareness Project. It was a government project, but it was shut down February 4th, 2004. They say that it was because of a violation of the Fourth Amendment here in the United States. However, February 4th, 2004, something else went right up, and it was called Facebook. And Facebook does really the same thing that LifeLog does. It was a tracking everybody's data. But the difference is that Facebook, you opt in. So they make it cool. They gamified it. Right now, here's a game. It's a social media game, and you can enter and catch up with your old classmates and meet new people who have like-minded interests. And so it's essentially this game world, if you think about it. But you're opting into it. But now what happens with Facebook, I mean, it's not just Facebook, but just take this example, is, okay, you say something that they don't like, now you can get a penalty, now you might get kicked out of the game. Maybe in some countries, not just Facebook, but like we saw this in the UK, where like tweets or Facebook or were actually becoming implemented as a means of Stasi type of enforced control, right? Somebody would tattle on you, and then the law enforcement would actually come after you because something you said was a violation of no longer just terms and services on a private platform, but now you're somehow violating the government, policies and laws. So that's kind of how I see it. I see it's going to be opt-in. So for us, I think there is this, and I've actually seen this, unfortunately, with some individuals that I've watched who were initially very critical of what they were seeing with things like Game B, because this is really, I think it's like technocracy on steroids. I describe it as a utopian kind of technological socialism is really what I think it is. But they were very critical of that because they were critical of the tyranny that could be enforced, and they've now they've parasitized the game A, and they are trying to clean out the malware, which makes them skeptical. And I'm not saying we should go through life fearful, or that we shouldn't explore any of the possibilities they're presenting, that that there's no merit or value. But when you strip all fear and all skepticism, it really does open the door for a lot of susceptibility and hypnotic effects. I mean, this is part of, Huxley talks about this with drugs, with psychedelics, and I mean, we have countless examples of the impacts of that. So I think that I've seen some people who are approaching it now because they're curious people, and they've moved from this skepticism to, oh, what they're doing is fascinating. We're going to become part of the quantum computer. And, now we can optimize everything. And they appeal to people in different, because we all have different interests. Because right now we are not all one. We are individuals. And for some people, the biometric data for health and fitness is really enticing. And so, they lure them into that community. For some people, they're very financially minded, and they're like, oh, well, we can now have these cryptocurrencies that are decentralized, and now we're outside the fiat currency system. I'm not saying the fiat currency system doesn't have problems, but you're luring these various people based on their passions and their interests. And when you watch some of these videos and they talk about things like no map and the hollow chains, they do talk about this while they're trying to create this integration through people's various passions. But it also looks a lot like what the network state is, where you're going to have these ideological countries essentially that are interconnected through technological interfaces. So to answer your question, like how do we mitigate that? I think that it is healthy to have a certain amount of skepticism. Again, that doesn't mean that we run through life fearful that there's going to be some sort of overlord that's going to, like hijack all of our freedoms. I don't think we do that, but really just to question things and not necessarily, and question how much of our freedom are we willing to trade for security or convenience, and really to weigh those things out, because I think that's really those are the two big ways, right? I think these technologies are going to be very convenient and very enticing, and they may protect you from certain other problems or crises. So, yeah. I don't know if that answers that, but
yeah, I got your opinion, which I wanted to hear. So thank you for that.
Cool. Next up, we got Sue.
Hi, Courtney. Thank you. That was truly epic. So a couple of things. I went through Game B yesterday, the Wikipedia page, and I was a part of the Integral community early 2000s in Vancouver. The Integral community actually imploded around 2004 to 2006. And then it seemed like it was put on life support. And then Mark Gaffney and Zach Stein really came in. But in the early 2000s, and I just was doing some research too, because we were familiar with Zach Stein and Daniel Schmachtenberger and the whole crew. And Mark Gaffney, his primary spiritual teacher, who he considers was Rabbi Cook, Abraham Cook. Yeah. And his doctoral advisor was Moshe Idel, who was a Kabbalah revisionist. Yep. And so that's where he's drawing from. Early in the 2000s, the Integral community was not really, it wasn't about the Aquarian age. It was coaches, therapists, educators, and we were grabbed by this whole idea of looking at human evolution, but the idea was to get it into academia and business and government to help the world. Very quickly, people started figuring out that was not what was happening. And so we started leaving. But then also Michael Crichton, the author of Jurassic Park, and in 2004, he wrote State of Fear, which was all about that the climate change narrative was false, and that the scientists were working the data. He originally had said to a friend, "I'm afraid to write this because they'll kill me if I do." And he had been writing about genetics and AI and all of the, and so I don't know if it was predictive programming or if he was actually highlighting what was coming down the pike. I don't know. Anyways, him and Wilbur were close friends. Wilbur stood by him through that, and that created another scandal within the Integral world. And so more people left. I mean, not for the right reasons necessarily, but Wilbur had finished his writing from 75 to 2002. And then he was really sick. And so what I don't know, but it seemed like Gaffney and Stein came in 2010, 2011 and established the, forget what it was called. I wasn't following it then anymore, but the World Philosophy and Religion and Integral Studies. And so then sorry, this is a little too long, but when you shared in your first Substack about the Hegelian dialogue between the Age of Aquarius, or you could say there was another facet of that, integral theory, and then on the other side of that, the AI world and techno and transhumanism, and then they were actually, two sides of the same coin. It just hit me so hard, and I had glimmers of that. But then going through Game B on Wikipedia, it was like it's all there. They've come together under one tent. So it was also terrifying to see the money and influence and power. I did see Zach Stein was a member of the Club of Rome. So then fast forward, Peter Thiel, I think, actually had the first dialogue, and then 2012, 2013 with Jordan. But then on the portal, he had on his first interview was with Peter Thiel. His second interview was with Daniel Schmachtenberger. And then Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey started talking about Bitcoin. They had Zoom calls, starting 2020, 2021, which, Matt's pointed out, Elon Musk is a cardboard cutout. And I think Jack Dorsey, the little I know of the beginnings of Twitter, was also probably a cardboard cutout. So just any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, so many. Well, thank you for all of that. Yeah, you tied a lot
I
of
gotta
things
say,
together.
Sue, that was cool. Thank you. Yeah, Courtney, sorry. I had to just say that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so certainly, okay, so Elon, absolutely. I actually I've done a couple of shows on this, many actually. Every facet of all the companies he's involved in is building out the fourth industrial revolution, which they say we're no longer even in. We're now in the fifth industrial revolution. He said he wants to make Twitter WeChat, but better. So, he wants it to be the everything platform, essentially, like the Noosphere, like the S7 was talking about their technology, the last one, but it's no longer for one country, it's for the world, right? So they all seem to share this vision of having the one app, although ironically, they keep talking about D-apps, which is decentralized apps, but yet they want a one app that is for everything. So yeah, that is, and Jack Dorsey actually still owns part of Twitter. People don't talk about that, even though he started his like Blue Sky or something like that, which is the left, quote unquote, the kind of version of Twitter now, for all the people who feel like Twitter has become, quote unquote, right wing, which I think is a false construct. But, certainly people have subscribed to that identity. And that seems to be how he's marketed his platform, as it being combatants to that. It's like the counter. And then Peter Thiel, yeah, I mean, his companies, now he's working on something called Prospera. And he said it's a place to build the future. And it's all about Bitcoin cities. So the subsidiary of Prospera is called Vitalia. And if you look at that one, they talk about how you can come build a city where death is an option. Death is optional. So this is definitely a transhuman agenda. So Peter Thiel, I see very much interworked with all of this. And, it's they like to present these things as just kind of like these individuals who have these organic kind of concepts that just happen to converge. And I'm not saying, because I very much believe in individual consciousness and free will, and I think human beings have incredible ingenuity and creativity, and that is what the reason I share this information is not to scare people. It's because I want that preserved. So I absolutely agree that these people do come to the table with their own ideas, but when you look at organizations that have so much money behind them, there starts to be convergence. There start to be incentives, regardless of whether people are aware or not. And so a lot of these ideas start to align and merge, and they build something bigger. So you're no longer talking about these individuals who have just, this idea. Now you're talking about a whole concept of Game B that wants to eradicate civilization as we currently know it. And merge it with these quantum technologies. And yeah, so I don't know if that addresses anything, but.
Thank you, Courtney. Thank you so much. Yeah, the Emergence Project, I think that they wanted to use the Wilbur's all quadrant, all levels framework and his 4 quadrants. And so they swoop in, they circle and they swoop in. Yeah, it's, just one more thing about Michael Crichton, because of the extraordinary work that Matt has done with his new trilogy, which is just genius. I think it's phenomenal. But Michael Crichton, after he came out with State of Fear about the climate change hoax, there was a fellow, Michael Crowley from New Haven, Connecticut, who was a publisher for, or a journalist for New York Times, Politico, and the Times, and so he wrote disparaging articles about Michael Crichton. So Michael Crichton wrote his next book called Next, in which he had Mick Crowley as a child rapist, and then Michael Crichton did die a couple of years later. So I don't know if there's, just.
Is there any relation to Alistair here, or is that a coincidence?
Yeah. So I Googled that. It came up, yes, but then when I was looking at the family ancestry, I don't know how to do the deep dive into ancestral. So
interesting. It's an interesting story. I've never seen anybody properly treat Michael Crichton in the possibility of his having been assassinated. I've encountered it, and his relationship to this whole grouping. I didn't know about that, so thank you for just putting that out there.
He had cancer, but right at the end of the wiki, I just looked wiki, but it said, he was undergoing treatment. It wasn't a serious cancer diagnosis, and they did not expect him to die.
Interesting.
So it just
Courtenay?
I don't know. I mean, you had asked if whether or not Michael Crichton was like a operational preparation of the environment, or if and I don't know, but I've always I don't know enough of his backstory to know, but the impression, and this is just like purely speculative, but just my gut instinct, I've always thought that he was kind of like a propaganda agent. A lot of these people do work with intelligence, and they're kind of fed things to create an operational preparation of the environment. But something kind of tells me that when he did like State of Fear, that was him kind of coming out against them. And that, of course, they don't like that too much. So the idea that he was assassinated is entirely plausible to me. This is not based on any factual evidence. It's just my gut instinct response. So,
and it may not. But.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you, Sue. Very cool offerings there. Brett, are you there?
I'm here.
All yours.
All right. Thanks for the presentation. Glad you're able to do all this work. A lot of us, we have busy working lives, so thank you for that. I'd like to tell my story. When I was first living in the States back in 2014 to 2015, I was listening to right-wing radio quite closely, and prior to the whole Trump fiasco and the woke movement, it was a very very strong, very religious sentiment vibe that you got. But it was during the 2015, the woke explosion, where all of a sudden I noticed that all these Christian people who thought in Christian sense, they start there's a perfect rise in them interviewing evolutionary biologists to try and counter the woke left. And I noticed that that's where Christian thoughts and evolutionary thoughts, they started to melt together and create this whole new being. That's when Jordan Peterson came on the stage. You mentioned the intellectual dark web. According to, I was listening to a lot of Glenn Beck, and according to him, it was Professor Godsod, who founded the intellectual dark web.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's true or not.
I don't know.
He's a Jewish refugee from Lebanon who moved to Canada at a young age, became an atheist. He hosts a podcast called The Sad Truth. Supposedly, who Jordan Peterson reached out to when he first wanted to speak out against the censorship bills that are coming through universities at the time. Anyways, that's just me. I'm trying to explain what I saw happen there.
Yeah, I don't know if Godsad was the creator of the intellectual dark web. I get the feeling that there was a little bit more kind of covert operations behind the inception, but I don't know.
Godsad doesn't strike me as a nefarious character. I think he's sincere.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, it does
I
seem.
don't, yeah. And I mean, he could have been used as a vehicle, but I get the impression that there was a, a bigger kind of machine behind them. I
Do
don't
you
have
think?
enough. Yeah, I know the only tangible thing I know is that there was I think it was called Thor, like that became like a Thor browser or something, but that it had some sort of a tie to intellectual dark web, and there was some. I think this was declassified. That there was some sort of CIA money tied to that. That, of course, doesn't prove that they like created the intellectual dark web, and I don't really know who did that. I've had a really hard time uncovering direct like financial ties, which is usually a pretty good indicator. But Eric Weinstein was a manager for Peter Thiel's financial firm. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there were something a little bit bigger behind them. But again, I can't prove it. I've tried. So now maybe I can spend a little.
Agree. There does seem to be something. The thing that's managing Thiel as a cardboard cutout, which gets us to a very, very high, high level power structure is I think what is also very much aligned with Curtis Yarvin, who's sort of a guru
Yes.
figure to Thiel in many
I didn't
ways,
even
very
go
much
into
tied
any
to
of that,
military
but yeah.
intelligence. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that it's a very the whole intellectual dark web thing is a very very thought through part of the operation of the machinery. So I agree with you, Courtney. It's not it's yeah.
Well,
Do
this is a
Thank you.
whole other tangent, so I won't go too far into it, but I'll just say this. There seems to be a very strategic, intellectual, kind of a propaganda construct trying to target with the intellectual dark web. And of course, that time where the wokeism was exploding. Now, a lot of the people in the intellectual dark web were not people who were typically thought to be the political quote unquote right wing, but they had suddenly had like a right wing banner around them because they were anti woke. But there was this very libertarian type of bent. And of course, this is where Peter Thiel is very much relevant because you start looking at things like even the network state, but a lot of his kind of concepts, they very much appeal to a libertarian community that you typically associate as being more right wing. But then you start to look at the origins of even that. And I know this is something Matt can speak to a lot also, but you start looking at the origins of some of that. I mean, even like Friedrich Hayek, and he was involved in, there was something called the Walter Lippmann Colloquium, and people who are familiar with Walter Lippmann, I mean, he was a journalist, but he was also worked with Edward Bernays. He was part of the Creole Commission, which oversaw they worked with the British War Propaganda Bureau, which is the predecessor. They were known as the Wellington House. They were the predecessor to Tavistock, the Tavistock Clinic, which became the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations with a grant from the Rockefellers in 1946. But Tavistock Clinic was 1920, and that was interestingly enough a grant for a specific building by the 11th Duke of Bedford, who has direct relations to the Russell clan, who created the Skull and Bones Society in partnership with Alphonso Taft, who was related to President Taft. Sorry, what were you going to say, Matt?
No, this is so good because what you're saying here, the Lippmann and Hayek, as well as von Mises, were also creators in 1939 of the Society for the Renewal of Liberalism liberalism that became the Mont Pelerin Society a few years later.
Yes. Well, the Walter Lippmann, it was an outgrowth of the Walter Lippmann Colloquium.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And bringing in the Russell thing because this Russell he said that the type of system that he prefers for managing society, and this guy's a lifelong world government fanatic, like a devotee for world government, but he said the most perfect system is anarcho-syndicalism. The exact same system that Elon Musk has been promoting is anarcho-syndical. What is anarcho-syndicalism? Well, it came out of the radical anti-authoritarian faction of the New Working Men's College conventions that was the first and second international around Mikhail Bakunin, which were groups that were basically it's known otherwise as libertarian socialism of and they kind of broke down because ideologically, being anarchists, they were resistant to the idea of organizing any conferences and organizing things, so they couldn't really make anything work. But the fact that you have these people like Bertrand Russell who are, like you said, behind the growth of Tavistock, or behind the growth of the whole thing that becomes Plan B later, or they're the ones who pervert Plan A, the current system, to make it dysfunctional, so that they can then say, as a Pygmalion effect, look, everything that we've ever had for the past 10,000 years must self-destruct, ignoring the fact that they're sabotaging it in order to then justify this thing that cannot be bottom up. Like, it's the bottom up solution, which is, like you said, Courtney. I love how you put this together in the course of, in different ways for your whole presentation. Everything that they're pushing for bottom up, local, blah blah blah, it's all centrally managed from the top, and they just need people to have the perception of bottom up reality, but no ability intellectually to understand the top down context in which their little local world is being shaped. That's what they want. So yeah, no, it's
well, and they need them to contribute to it and to opt into it.
Yeah,
they need them to comply. And I mean, not to bring this into a religious framework, but I mean, that is literally the framework for Luciferianism too. Like, they, if you subscribe to a biblical framework, both God and Lucifer or Satan want to be chosen, right? They will not force, because they do believe that you have free will, and so neither one can impose upon you. And so that's kind of, this does look like, regardless of whether you subscribe to whether you believe in, God, Lucifer or not, it does align with this Luciferian framework of, you're going to opt into our hell, but we're not going to force you. We're going to make it really enticing. I mean, Lucifer is the most beautiful angel. It's like it's always done with the guise of beauty and convenience and all these, like, art and creativity, all these things that seem
join us
like
on Pleasure
magical and
Island.
beautiful. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Are you, just one more thing. Do you feel like a guy named David Sloan Wilson?
I don't think so.
He's also another evolutionary biologist. It's funny how it's always these evolutionary biologists, it seems. He was on a YouTube video called An Evolutionary Approach to a Meaningful Life. I didn't write down the YouTube channel, but I think it's called Awaken University. I'll just read you a quote I wrote down from it. It says, "I had the honor of a 1-hour conversation with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, about 2 years ago. And in preparation, I did a lot of reading on Tibetan Buddhism, taking place in incessant warfare in feudal societies that were never questioned by the religion. What Buddhism did, which is an accomplishment, was basically increase the scale between group competition, provide a social glue. There's no epoch in human history that was different. So the idea that we're going to create cooperation at the scale of the whole earth, well, that's new in history. But that doesn't mean it can't happen, because evolution is all about the future being different from the past. So it can happen. And in fact, in some ways, it's like the final step in a long journey. So going from the current nation states up to global governance, all the resources are at hand for that it can happen. But of course, you have to do it the right way. Thanks for your time, Courtney.
Thank you. Yeah, that sums it up. Yeah, we just have to do it the right way. Never heard that before.
What could go wrong? Okay, so we have time here. I see Richard and Randy had their names up in the list. So Richard, you can go for it, and then we might have to wrap it up unless I see any other questions last minute that look pretty good. So Richard.
Okay, thank you. A quick comment and 2 quick questions. The comment is, Matt, I think there's an AI tool on Zoom that will automatically do good transcripts. I've heard positive comments about it.
Yeah.
A little question is, I wondered why Courtney didn't get full screen for her videos like the lecturers usually do. Just curious.
I already wrote to you. That's because that's just the way you were looking at it from from how it's being
you
recorded.
You can choose gallery or speaker view.
Yeah, so you can choose whether you have a speaker view or gallery view. That's on you. So don't worry about it. It'll be totally full screen. I promise.
Because I never used gallery view ever, but it always went to full screen once before. Yep. Never mind. That's a trivial thing. Yeah. The real question, and Matt commented some. I didn't really quite understand your answer, but I mean, I like to see some hope in BRICS. And so, I mean, are China and Russia going to be taken up by this plan B, or are they going to resist it?
So I can read something to you. What I really see it as, and people like Brzezinski and Kissinger have talked a lot about this in their writing, where they talk about how they will pit the East and the, I'm paraphrasing, so, you know, forgive me on that, but they talked about how they will pit like the East and the West against each other, but really so that they can have an emergence of a Hegelian synthesis, which would be the technocracy that would take over. And I very much see that. I see this as, let me see if I can find, because I'll be more eloquent if I can read this than I will just doing it from rote memory. See if I can find it. But I don't think I'm going to pronounce his name right. Bogdanov, but he came up with this concept of technology. And that's very much what I see that this is really. Let me see, I think I have it here. Okay, here it is. So, yeah, so it's, and this is from ChatGPT. And actually, I talked to this guy on Twitter just to give him, you know, the credit, but he's done simultaneously. I had no idea until last night that he even did an article on Game B, or that he's been, you know, working on this, and he's done some phenomenal work. So if anybody's interested, he has a Substack. And by the way, Substack does transcripts also, I believe. But he has a great Substack. He also has done like a major mega thread on Game B. And this was in this thread. It was a chat that he had with ChatGPT. And so he says, would Game B represent a merger of East-West via Bogdanov? I believe that's how you say it. And so now ChatGPT responds. And I think this is very accurate. This is how I see it as well. So he says that the thought about the Game B Bogdanov merger for a few seconds. A broad concept terms, yes. You could see Game B as an emergent framework that merges East experiences with externally planned socialism, Marxism, and the West push towards internally driven ethical socialism through the adaptive lens that Bogdanov proposed. Here's how that system might look. East, Marxist socialism, external, historically top-down, state-driven, with an emphasis on collective resource allocation, heavy reliance on external enforcement of social goals. This is when I was talking about that, the ethical framework of the internal versus the external ethics. West, ethical socialism, internal, increasing emphasis on personal moral responsibility. And remember, we have a new definition of what sovereignty is from Jordan Hall. And the ethical consumerism and local grassroots movements relies on internal self-regulation of voluntary action, whether it's done by, external UNESCO or internal through brainwashing and the re-education of these Game B charter schools. Either way, the result is the same. That's my, that's not in this, I added that. Bogdanov, scientific organizational socialism is adaptive, blends bottom-up and top-down approaches through the technology, the science of organization. So this was a concept that Bogdanov created. Envisions feedback loops between individual initiative, internal, and societal structures that are external. Game B is the potential merger of these two. Complex systems and feedback loops, right? This is what cybernetics is. And remember now they have the new Macy Foundation, the new Macy's conferences that they're working on, the new cybernetics. And so it embraces systems thinking, continuous learning, and iterative governance. Precisely the kind of dynamic organization that Bogdanov advocated. Post, coercive, and post-individual. And they talk about this all the time. They're talking about a post-human world. And there are handbooks on post-humanism, by the way. This is not just a concept. They've really laid this out very explicitly. So it is a concept at the moment, sorry. But it's not just like some, idea that's been thrown out. Like they've written extensive books on this. So it's by transcending purely coercive or purely voluntary models, Game B aims to create self-organizing but guided social operating system. The shared vision with diverse entry points. From the East perspective, large-scale coordination and cooperative planning, but shifted away from heavy-handing coercion. From the West experience, strong emphasis on individual ethics, bottom-up initiatives, but scaled with robust organizational scaffolds. In that sense, Game B can be viewed as the modern iteration of Bogdanov's middle path, right? This is what I was talking about, how they all these people reference the golden mean, Aristotle's golden mean, as being like the middle way for ethics. And people can argue with me on whether Aristotle intended it that way or not. That's actually not my point. My point is that that is what they use as their guide to create this compass for morality that is going to be, I think, really controlled by AI eventually. And I'm getting to answer your question, but I just want to read the rest of this. A holistic system where both external structures and internal ethical commitments continuously shape one another. This would, in theory, overcome the zero-sum pitfalls of purely top-down or purely bottom-up models, offering resilient, adaptive next step that integrates the lessons from both East and West. So to answer your questions, like what will happen with the East, with BRICS, or with Russia, with China. Now, I've read the plans from the AI World Society. Now, this is the UN's vision for the centennial. I think it's also worth noting that when does Ray Kurzweil think that the singularity will occur? He now has his new book, The Singularity is Nearer. He says it will be 2045. When does Jim Rutt, who wrote this this kind of blueprint, he calls it A Journey to Game B. It's a roadmap, this Medium article, and he wrote this in 2020, but he's updated it. And he says that the pre-Game B, like the first emerging Game B, is going to be 2045. When does the UN 100 plans for the AI World Society come to fruition? Their goal is for 2045. So I'm seeing a common theme here. They really do. And in the AI World Society, they have this letter from the future, because these people channel, you know, the future. And so they have a letter from the future, and it's a pretty long letter. I have read it out, and I've shown it in some of my shows before. So the name of that Substack was A Journey to Game B. This is by Jim Rutt, and it's a Medium article. Oh, the Substack that I was talking about was Escape Key. But anyway, so they talk about in this AI World Society how it's this vision for the centennial of the UN. And this is in partnership. It's the UN100.net. You can look it up, or you can look up the Boston Global Forum. They've done this in partnership with each other. Boston Global Forum being held by former governor of Massachusetts, Michael Dukakis. And this is the plans for what will be in 2045, which is in the centennial of the UN. And they're talking about a world that's no longer, yes, it's the UN, but it's being run by AI. And so in that, they constantly talk about how China is the model. They say that it's not going to be exactly like that, because it's not exactly like that. They're going to take the values from the West. So like the West there's all this, it's very cultural in the West to have a lot of shaming, right? Like that's a lot of how the social engineering is effective through Western culture. It's a little different through Eastern culture. I'm not saying one is better than the other. This is just, difference in the cultures. But in the West, there is a lot of, cultural and social engineering utilizes that in order to make people think, well, you're a good person if you, build a company that's sustainable. You're a good person if you reduce your carbon emissions, and you don't eat cows because they fart methane. And again, this is not a judgment on any of these things. This is just how that is being implemented, and how the social engineering works. And so they're going to take that. Because for the West, it's much easier to get people to inculcate it into what the value system is, whereas on the East, it's more traditional historically to impose upon them top down, like you follow these rules or these are the consequences. Whereas in the West, traditionally, that's not been how our governments have been structured. So that's very foreign to us. So in the West, it's more about getting the people to decide to opt into their own tyranny. And so I think it will be a merger of the two, and the technologies are global. These are not, I mean, we see that already. All these technologies are not, one country or, East-West allocated. They may have different rules around them, but right now the UN is creating an AI ethical blueprint. They already have it. They have the website for that. You can read that yourself. The UN 100 has many ethical guidelines for AI. But my question is, are those the people who we want determining what are the ethics and what do we deem, to be ethical for AI? And then what happens when those programs are created and those guidelines are implemented? Because everything that an artificial intelligence does, once the code is set, it becomes exponential, right? That is the part of machine learning. I don't believe that we have sentient machines, or that we will necessarily. I don't think that that is actually true. But we do have algorithms that can build upon themselves. And this is global. This is not an East-West thing. So I think that the part of the goal here is to have people arguing over East-West and which is going to be the better structure, have them fight against each other. And meanwhile, the technocrats are like, here, we have the solution. So.
Well, the thing is, though, is that what I understand of BRICS is it's very protective of national sovereignty and distinct cultural, in each nation. And that just seems counter to everything you were saying about what Plan B is about.
Mm-hmm. Sure. But that you hear all of the things that they incorporate from Eastern culture. So it's not like they're saying this is only for the West. And national sovereignty, you just heard Jordan Hall rewrote the definition of what sovereignty is. So this is about the technology. That's why I said, when you look at it conceptually, so maybe BRICS itself, or the people involved in BRICS, are going to say, oh no, we don't subscribe to Game B. But does that mean they're going to say, oh, well, when we go from Web 2 to Web 3, we're out, we're not going to use the internet? Are they going to say we're not going to use any of these blockchain technologies? Are they going to say that, we don't even know half of the, innovations that they're, right now, a lot of it is just maybe further developed than what I'm aware of. But right now there's a lot of money in Silicon Valley, not just building these technologies, but also building all of these conferences and really just creating the conditioning necessary for people to buy into them. And these technologies are global. So when you have an AI world society, and I don't think it matters whether or not there's a country that says that they have these set of rules, because it's an AI world society, and they will create ways to entice people to enter, and they will also create ways to lock people out. And this is my argument when people talk about how they just want to go live off the grid, right? I'm like, you want to live off the grid but be on the internet? Like, how is that going to work out? I think people just haven't thought through a lot of these concepts very, very far. And I'm not saying, there may be a lot that I haven't, that I'm not aware of, that I don't have the foresight to see. There's a lot of information that's, I'm certainly not privy to everything. But the way I see it, I don't see that being somehow a bulwark against this Game B. And if anything, I think it's probably advancing it through this kind of hegemonic kind of battle.
I shared a couple of links in the chat box pertaining to some of these questions of where are the Game B operations inside of China or Russia. So there are a few links in there. Maybe I'll try to remember, if I do remember, I probably will forget to include it in the description box. But in case I forget, the Foundation for the Eternal Feminine is directly a Gregory Bateson Tavistock operation, which was created in 2015, and it's run by a disciple of Bateson named David Hawk, who was briefing the Chinese Politburo in 2007. He was given a lot of prominence inside of the Chinese upper establishment around not Hu Jintao. Yeah, it was Hu Jintao. And the Shanghai clique of billionaires that were built up during the British control of China's economy for a century, that billionaire clique represents sort of the zone with Hong Kong of the greatest greater faction, like the deep state complex inside of China that brought in the World Economic Forum operations, the summer WEF programs into China, and they bankrolled about I think the port at first in 2015 immediately like $700 million. It grew quite a bit to brainwash young girls who were part of the rich upper level, like upper 1% families in China, in Western spas, saunas, resorts that were controlled by the Foundation for Eternal Feminine. And people can go to the website. It's really weird. He's basically calling for a Taoist revolution to overthrow Confucianism and instaure a Taoist revival.
The first line is "Hope shines through the cracks in the system."
Yeah,
on their
yeah,
site.
that's it.
Yeah,
That's the primary direct thrust of Game B. And I mean, what I've seen is that there is a big fight. So mapping out their operations in China, which families were part of sponsoring this thing, bringing it into China, and then looking at this, there's been like 5.3 million Chinese, what do you call it, Communist Party members, very high level, like a former governor of the Bank of China who's given a death sentence. There's, I mean, two heads of the Chinese Politburo or Interpol, two heads of the Chinese version of the CIA were given like 30-year sentences. There's this huge battle that I've seen over the past decade inside of China trying to take down this whole scaffold. Jack Ma is another one. Falun Gong is another organization tied to Bannon pushing for a Taoist revolution to overthrow Confucianism and bringing in a sort of mystical libertarian Taoism. So you got this stuff going on. I mean, it's important to map that stuff out, and we've been trying as best as we can. And we have friends there as well, living in China, trying to giving us the best sort of assessments that they can. But there's definitely like also in Russia similar things too. You mentioned Bogdanov. I've read some Bogdanov. He's really important because he takes us into the Aleister Crowley occult cybernetics networks baked into Russia that were working to bring in this anarcho-syndicalism of the Mikhail Bakunin ideology into the defining of what communism was going to be, because it's a highly underdefined thing in many ways. And he ended up like killing himself because he was obsessed with immortality and he just did blood transfusions and it wasn't very safe and he died. But you got this whole cosmist movement, which today, it's really a Gnostic, satanic agency at the core with like it always is, an exoteric front that has light and life and language that sounds very nice. But the inner core, there's like this special thing for the inner elites. And that was what was working with Esalen, what tapped into Lawrence Rockefeller's funding back in the 60s, 70s, and started working together to have a controlled disintegration of the Russian economy in 2000, or the Soviet Union in 1992. Gorbachev was sponsoring these Esalen conferences, the whole occult branch of the intelligentsia, Bogdanov followers.
They even had the what was the Esalen hot tub diplomacy. You can pull it off the CIA.gov. Yeah. And that was all about
Yeltsin was in hot tubs doing orgies and whatever else it Esalen. Yeah, I know. So this thing, as far as I could see it, one of the leading representatives of this thing today is Alexander Dugin. Which is a fake opposition to globalists.
Who venerated Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And Putin did fight to keep him as far removed from him as possible. People in the West try to paint him as Putin's Rasputin or whatever, his advisor, but I think they were in the same room like once ever. And that's like, they're trying to like make him seem like the guy, and he's trying to be the guy again. And I'm afraid that there are dark forces in Russia that are working to rehabilitate him. He was allowed to come back for the first time in a decade of exile to the University of Moscow to give a lecture there. That's not a good thing. So, but there are battle lines, right? And it's something that is investigatable, and definitely they like aspects of China, like the tradition of top down command and control. They like that. They like those things. They don't like the Confucian Renaissance, the moral values within Confucianism. They don't like that. They don't like all of those things. but they like the mechanical structures that, you know, and so they're trying to take what they want and leave what they don't want. But
Right.
there is a fight. I don't want people to think that there's no battle either. You know, it's there.
I think
I don't
there's
know.
a battle everywhere. That's the hope. I mean,
Yeah.
that as long as we still have free will and individual consciousness, that is the hope, is that there will be a battle and that we're not
Right.
all subsumed
Amen.
into the right. Oh,
Amen,
I just want to
sister. Right.
right. Seriously, this is from Elon, and I don't. This was it was in 2018, but he says, by the way, I'm not actually a socialist. I'm just the kind that shifts resources from the most productive to the least productive, pretending to do good, but I am actually a socialist. Sorry. Okay. Well, he actually says it. I am actually a socialist, just not the kind that shifts resources from most productive to least productive, pretending to do good will actually come harm. True socialism seeks greatest good for all. Well, utilitarianism, right? Now we have the effective altruism coming out of John Stuart Mill, and the effective altruism movement was all Silicon Valley guys. So
Just utilitarianism under a new name.
mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
All right, so we got time for one last one. So, Randy, if you're still there, you can have it.
That's funny.
Well, I am here, and thank you very much, Courtney, for a tremendous presentation. I was going to ask a question about Aleister Crowley's "Do What Thou Wilt," being the summation of the ethics of the Game B crowd, but it seems that really is it. And what I also enjoyed about your presentation was the involvement of technocracy. So much of it touched on Patrick Wood's work.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been hearing and reading about some of the recent publications in regard to the advancement of the Internet of Everything, the biotechnical or biodigital convergence, a digital twin, as being very, very sophisticated and advanced technologies already deployed and implemented. I've even heard my county supervisors discussing it at one of their open board meetings. And so I'd like to quickly ask about the acronym for the vaccine, the COVID-19 Certificate of Vaccine Identification 19, and 19 being AI. Do you have any thoughts on that? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is, honestly. There are people who have read that very literally, and then that gets into the whole conversation of were there nanobots injected or self-assembling type of technology. I don't have enough evidence to confirm or deny that that's what occurred. I do know that Charles Lieber was very instrumental in, and he had several patents on technology that was injectable to create, self-assembling things that look like nanobots. I don't know if it's quite nanobots. He was partners with Elon Musk on the Neuralink. He was the one who patented the neural lace, so that's the mesh. So, I mean, it's certainly entirely possible. I just don't have the evidence. I don't know if that's what occurred, but it's still effectively is the same thing, regardless of whether that's what they injected, because it became, I mean, that was when these digital passports, these vaccine passports were rolling out across the world, and some countries did adopt them. I think that they were trying to make it where like it was a barrier to entry. So you either, had some sort of identification proving you had it, or maybe you really do have a MAC ID. I mean, that was one of the theories that was being floated. Again, I can't confirm like the technology that was implemented. And I don't know that even if we subscribe to that theory that there were some nanobots being injected, not all of them were the same. I mean, many countries use different variations. There were different companies, so not all these. And I actually think there were a lot of like control tests. So I think there was a lot of saline being given out too. That's just my theory, but they do use the digital twins already. That is very much being utilized, and that is used in precision health. This was something I had been researching recently, and because I was very concerned about, I'm I like to give hope wherever we can give hope. I think hope is really important. And a lot of people who are giving kind of just a black pill, and I see it now that Trump has already been declared as the next president. There's a lot of effort to try and split the movement, and this black pilling of, well, they're all just part of the satanic cabal has been going on for quite some time. And I certainly don't think that he's our savior, and I don't think any politician is going to save us. But I do think there are some hopeful things, and I really like some of the things that they've been talking about, for example, with MAHA, this Make America Healthy Again platform. And I would love if some of this actually comes to fruition. I mean, if we just see very simple things like putting tallow back into food instead of the seed oil, I think we're moving in the right direction. That's a great thing. So some of these things sound great, but I was very concerned that Bobby is a really big supporter of this precision health, and the precision health is using digital twins as part of their infrastructure. And you can look at like the 2050 plan it's called like the EMS 2050 plan. They have, I think, a 2055 one also for the EMTs. And it's all about using these biosensors and collecting as much of our data as possible, biometric data. And then they're going to tailor it. And they do a lot of this with the digital twin. So they're going to use the digital twin for this research. And so much can go wrong with that, besides from all of the privacy and, at that point, things like HIPAA, I'm sure, go out the window. But when you start talking about that kind of biometric surveillance and Internet of Nanobio things, but yeah, the digital twin. And I think another thing that's worth pointing out is the digital twin concept. I think because, when you look at this conscious evolutionary theory and the, evolutionary leaders and their role in all of this, I think the idea of the twin flame is very conceptually relevant to this digital twin thing. They very much believe in like having a, spiritual twin flame. And so because they don't seem to see much of a distinction between the technology and ourselves, I mean, we're all just a bunch of atoms with electromagnetic fields. And so what difference does it make if you're in the human form or the technological form? So the digital ID, could be your twin flame. I don't think, it may sound like a reach, but I think that it's related. I think it's a related concept because they're very much intertwined with the spiritual, even though Jim Rutt said, no, that was the battle between these spiritualists and these scientists, but it seems like they've merged the two. So
Yeah. No, they definitely did. And this idea as well of like a spirit imprint of ourselves onto the ether that will live on forever is a very materialist proof of the soul that even Elon has put into his own weird words, describing how we're all digital imprints that will live on forever because of our having sent emails and imposed our sort of fingerprint trace of our personality into the digital world when we play a video game or something. And so he put it actually into his own materialist writing, this fake spirituality, which does come out of the we saw with Blavatsky, like you did that very well in your presentation. A lot of this was given form through the theosophists that tried to define what the ether was in a very weird way, where ghosts would interface with us in this physical domain, and that would account for why channelers would be able to be conduits for demons and angels and the dead necromancers that would speak through them if they're gifted. And that they're gifted if they had like schism, broken schizophrenic personalities, usually through a lot of trauma that helped them become gifted. And they had a whole attempt to create a science of the spirit around this stuff. And you can see it taken on Silicon Valley form during the Cold War, and it's just gotten more sort of language that just clouds. I loved what you said as well about taking the quote from Nietzsche that they muddy the waters to make it seem deep. I'm going to use that a lot. Is it's batshit crazy. It's simplistically minded batshit crazy stuff at the end of the day, but they make it seem like it's so profound and so complex and scientifically justifiable, and it's none of that.
No. And they write so much, and they do these hours and hours conversations, and it's like you could have said that in 3 seconds. I mean, it's like it wasn't that profound or that complicated. We didn't need to sit through 3 hours of it. It was torture. But yeah.
Courtney, this was cool. This was really good. You've opened up a lot of doors for further investigation, exploration. And I think you've empowered all of us to have a better appreciation for the nature of the traps, the psychological, epistemological traps that are abounding way too much in our current world. But that's always been the case. There's always been traps. There's always been an epistemological battle. So we shouldn't feel like we're something out of the norm. It's always been this fight. And by understanding it, we can navigate it much more competently than if we were ignorant. So thank you so much for doing this and sharing so much of your time. Wow, that's just great. So everybody, they could check out Courtney's. I would imagine everybody's already subscribed. If not, subscribe to Courtney's podcast. All of the links are going to be in the description box below. Substack as well. Courtney's launched a Substack. She's working on a book. Keep your eyes peeled for that coming out. But until then, subscribe to the Substack, and I look forward to further conversations in the weeks and months ahead. So thank you, Courtney.